Hello, hi guys, and good evening, good morning, good afternoon to wherever you are, wherever you may be, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio number 39, Narrative, Cologne edition. I am the host of Honey Badger Radio today. My name is Brian Martinez, in case you don't already know, and I'm joined by our lovely Badger friends. Really quick, we have the usual suspects. And these are the mistresses of internalized misogyny, Alison, Cherry,
Yes.
Hannah, and Karen.
The
Nobody
mistresses of
hates women more than these women who
I,
also hate
I'm
them.
I'm not actually really here. I'm I'm off somewhere in a wonderful place, where there's plenty of bratwurst but no rape.
Mm-hmm.
So
We are in the land of bratwurst and rape. That's where we're going. We're going to get sausage, and then sausage is going to get us. So let's start with Hannah's overview. Hannah, I'm going to give you the floor. Clean it and make me a sandwich. Hannah, are you struggling with the mute button?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. It was doing its thing. I hate the mute button. The mute button sucks. And I now have lost. Well, shit. You guys get to hear me cuss now, because
okay.
as soon as I unmuted the
Here,
window
let me
with the you guys are gonna have to talk for a minute, because
let me fill the dead air. Let me fill
yes, fill the dead air. And before she fills the dead air, I just want to let you guys know that I'm not wearing any cologne.
Oh.
I thought you were gonna say you weren't wearing any pants, and I was gonna applaud, but
You too.
No, I have to be dressed for work because I got to jet out of here like at the last minute, like I do every other week.
I bought my 13-year-old son a shirt that he wears to school. It says, "The best pants are no pants."
I never wear pants for the show.
I wear pajama pants.
Surprised he hasn't been charged with rape for that shirt yet.
I don't even wear clothes, as you can see.
He gets away with that shirt, but if it had a beer logo on it, or like a pot leaf, or it had Homer Simpson with a mug of beer on it, that would not be okay. He would be sent home. Anything to do with drugs or any swear words, that's not okay. But the best pants are no pants. That's okay with his school. I was gonna regale everybody while Hannah's looking for her piece.
Well, I'm trying to get this damn thing to open back up again, but I've got it.
I was
But go on.
I was gonna regale everybody with the strewn profanity, the string of profanity that exited my mouth when I realized that my two rear wheels had locking nuts on them, and that someone who had worked on my car years ago had just put the key in his pocket and not put it back in the little thing. And
Yeah, and it sucks when your nuts are locked and you don't have anything to put back in the little thing.
Yeah.
it sucks when you need to get your wheels off your car and you can't, because somehow the person who previously owned your vehicle thought that the wheels, the rims of a Kia, of a fucking $20,000 Kia, are worth stealing.
All right. And speaking of stealing,
Okay. The next time I get back into DMing, I am going to create a place with a region named the rims of a Kia. That just sounds perfect.
Yeah.
And now I actually
On the
do
rims.
have my write-up on the screen now. So.
Okay, perfect. Go ahead.
And it's very short. And don't make fun of my short write-up, because this was something I really couldn't write about without either creating an entire article, which will be published tomorrow, or just asking some questions. So this is just asking questions, and I've titled it Questioning the Narrative, because the entire controversy over the Cologne incident seems to boil down to a short set of simple questions. Should we just automatically believe all of the accusers in this situation? And if so, what logic exempts these particular accusations from the standard of evidence we usually apply? Is this really an either-or situation as it's being treated, wherein skeptics should be accused of siding with rapists against their victims? And if we're adopting listen and believe now, does that really infer characteristics upon practitioners of the religion associated with the accused? And how about the ethnic group most associated with that religion? So that's my series of questions. Discuss.
I think we need a bit more of a rundown for anybody who has had their head. No, well, maybe has been very sensibly saying, you know what, I don't want to follow this. This smells like drama, or just doesn't want this in their life. Maybe a rundown of the general situation in Cologne and what's going on.
Well,
Go ahead.
It's not just Cologne. The big one was Cologne. It was reportedly there was a group of about 1,000 men who appeared to be of Arab and North African descent who converged in front of the big train station and cathedral and all of that, and were shooting fireworks, firecrackers or fireworks, like Roman candles that, I don't know, Roman candles don't shoot, but the ones that shoot, into a crowd of people, like shooting firecrackers at people, and then there were something like 90 complaints from women regarding being groped or sexually assaulted, and a multitude of other eyewitness reports and complaints of having pockets picked, being mugged, beatings. There were according to one eyewitness, there were several men who were essentially beaten and kind of stomped. So, I mean, it was just sort of this big, massive, gigantic clusterfuck. The security and police on hand that were there, just to sort of keep an eye on things, because, you know, we have big, huge celebrations, New Year's Eve in Edmonton. It's called the First Night Festival. You might have a few thousand people all in one place, right? You know, you have some security there, but you're expecting people are going to be behaving themselves for the most part. But given the nature of what was reported to have happened, the police and the security were unable to keep up with it and unable to deal with it, and couldn't even keep up with the complaints of the alleged victims who were approaching them in the moment to say, you know, I've just been assaulted or I've just been robbed. Couldn't keep up with it. So, I mean, it was, and there were other cities that were reportedly in Europe, that were reportedly in Germany and Sweden and other places that reportedly had similar things happen on New Year's Eve. And the sort of go-to narrative of conservatives seems to be that this was all a pre-planned, premeditated, organized, assault. It was like a mission, tactical mission, and on the part of a group of refugees. And I don't know that there's any evidence that it was organized. I don't think that you need any evidence like that. I don't think that something like this needs to be organized in order for it to happen, is what I'm getting at. But there seems to be this whole idea that all of this was coordinated in advance, and it's really, really because the narratives around sexual assault, because the narratives around Islam and European immigration, because the conservative narrative, because the progressive narrative, right? I mean, I absolutely would buy the idea that conservatives would be overstating the problem and making it into something, even if they believe what they believe, right? And they're not lying as far as they know. They honestly may believe something that isn't true in this case. They may be putting more onto it on the Islamic angle than actually exists. The progressives, I would not put it past them to try to really minimize any kind of Islamic element in this and minimize the sexual assaults, and because it does, like, everybody in the media is essentially serving their own narrative, and so it's like next to impossible to decide who to trust, right? Because they all have their own agenda, they all have their own narrative.
Wasn't the mayor, or prime minister rather, of Germany, Angela Merkel, did she say something to the effect of what women can do to make themselves more safe around men? Was that something?
That was the mayor of Cologne. She said that. She said that women should, maybe dress more modestly, go out in groups, don't get separated, keep an eye, and all of this, right? So, I mean, and that was, I mean, that's good advice under the circumstances, as far as keeping yourself safe under the circumstances. But the circumstances are that if that's what you have to do to be safe, there's a fucking problem, right?
But isn't that also something that was decried as misogynist when spoken about in context of women in America going to?
Of course. Well, and I would tend to agree that women should be able to walk around dressed however they like. They should always have an eye out for their own safety. But, like bare arms or cleavage is not an invitation to be sexually assaulted. It's not. It's still good advice given the situation, but that doesn't mean that the situation doesn't need to be dealt with. If the situation is such that women cannot go out with bare arms and a push-up bra and not get assaulted, then the situation itself needs to be dealt with. But Angela Merkel, she said something along the lines of, now she's looking into, and the government is investigating the possibility of deporting problem refugees and problem migrants. Like, how could you, like, Canada takes about almost 300,000 immigrants and refugees a year, right? It's about 40,000 refugees altogether, and a couple 100,000 immigrants. And we deport at least 10,000 people every year, right? Who break the law, or they refuse to learn English or French. They refuse to be, stably and gainfully employed or whatever, right? Go, just get out. Or they just don't want to assimilate in whatever way. They don't want to respect our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Get lost, go away, right? It took something like this, for Angela Merkel to say, well, we're exploring the possibility of deporting migrants when they make trouble now. Like, was deportation not a thing until now? Like,
well, I'd also like to add that in addition to the assault that some of these women experienced, there have been reports that while they were trying to describe their assault to the police on camera, they kind of stuttered and had a really hard time identifying the race of the individuals for the fear of being seen as racist, as well as one woman in particular who spoke about her incident, and there was a video online, and then her name in the video was released, and she received a second, basically, wave of assault from people claiming that she was staging this as an anti-immigrant and things like that.
Okay, well, in my case, the problem that I'm having is that I've seen a lot of, first of all, something that really makes me suspicious is I get directed to sites that say, this is a video of the situation in Cologne. And if you read a little bit further, it says, oh, wait, no, multiple times. This video isn't actually a situation in Cologne, but it does demonstrate what German women are feeling. And it's like, what? This doesn't make me trust this narrative at all.
Yeah, or this isn't actually from Cologne, from New Year's Eve in Cologne. However, this has happened,
Yeah.
hundreds of times in European cities. Now, like,
How am I to believe that you can capture on a smartphone something happening to a woman in Tahrir Square in 2013, and 3 years later in Germany, in a first world country with how many, like 2 smartphones for every person, and there's nothing? They can't find real video?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the other thing that occurred to me is, like, there are videos from Cologne, but all they seem to show is people, in a large crowd milling around, and some of them are pushing each other around and just being rowdy, and they're firing off Roman candles. But I have some skepticism with this for a few different reasons. One of them is the size of the crowd versus the population. It's that the incident is being used to demonize. And I mean, we've seen research showing that within a given population, or at least indicating that within a given population, there's going to be somewhere between 4 and 13% of the population that has a tendency toward criminal violence, and that tendency will include sexual violence. So it's not, I'm not necessarily skeptical that enough to say that all of the accusations are false. It's entirely possible that some of these accusations are true, and even that a good number of them are true, but it doesn't indicate necessarily what's being inferred by talking about these. And we should be able to talk about these accusations as the incidents that they are, and not generalize them to an overall population any more than we would generalize any other accusations of violence or accusations of sexual violence. That's the first thing. The second thing is about the safety advice. Almost entirely, the safety advice that was given is the advice that men have to follow all the time. Men always have to be aware of their surroundings. Men always have to have in the back of their minds that any given person might be hostile towards them. If they don't know that person, they're considered responsible for their own endangerment if they don't take those things into consideration. And as far as the advice on clothing, the only reason that women get that advice is because they're the only sex that runs around exposing themselves the way that women expose themselves. Men don't usually, they're not tolerated dressing like that. It's expected that men, and I'm not just talking about like bare arms and bare legs. A guy that runs around with his shirt unbuttoned down to his belly button looks, to a lot of people, he's considered sleazy,
or
even when
ridiculous.
he's not, or ridiculous, yeah. Or people will make statements about the nature of his sexuality, and all of this stuff. Like, is women are exempt from that type of criticism, and they consider it slut shaming if you notice.
Yeah.
So it's not that women are being singled out to be told they have to cover their bodies up more than men. This is a point, an acknowledgement that women generally are not expected to cover their bodies up as much as men, and that it can make you look like a more vulnerable person, a person who's less likely to be believed if you make an accusation, to somebody who is predatory. And a way to protect yourself from a predator is to indicate that you are more likely to be believed if you accuse them. And so covering yourself to a degree can be a protective measure. It's not armor. It's not going to stop, the worst predators out there, and it's probably not going to stop most of them. But it is a question to consider. And the last thing I would like you to consider in this instance is, what do you think would have happened to a man who had walked through that crowd in little more than a banana hammock? You know, what do you think? What do you think would happen to a guy who had just walked through that crowd without a shirt on? Do you think those guys would have left him alone if they were doing what they're accused, or do you think maybe they would have beat the shit out of him?
Okay, well, if it's Muslim guys, there probably would have been a toss-up between beating the shit out of them or propositioning them. I'm not shitting you.
Yeah. So you never know. So this isn't a gendered thing.
Well, what
Except
I
the
do want
behavior that leads to it might be gendered.
I do want to add as well. Okay, when the UVA rape hoax, like when the rape accusation fell apart, when everybody started to realize, everybody who was sane started to realize, okay, this is a complete fucking hoax. And and I hate to quote Ann Coulter because I think Ann Coulter is like really, really annoying. But she said, well, if there is this huge rape culture on American college campuses, right, and rape's going on willy-nilly all over the place, why is it that every rape that gets talked about, it turns out to be a hoax? Like, if there's a rape culture going on, can't they give us one actual rape that actually happened, right? And it seems like there's this parallel, and I agree with that. If there is a rape culture, there should be more examples than UVA and Mattress Girl and the frickin' woman who sucked the guy off while he was blacked out and confessed to her student advisor
and accused him of raping her,
and then accused him of frickin' sexually assaulting her, right? And then he got we would have something going on that was actually a credible. We would have at least one credible fucking case in the media, right? As opposed to all hoaxes. And this is what gets me about all of this footage that we keep getting directed to, and they say, okay, this isn't from Cologne on that night, but it's an example of what happened to hundreds of people, on New Year's Eve across Europe, blah, 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 right? Well, if it's actually happening, I want to see at least one piece of footage that can be verified from Cologne, right, or from Stuttgart or wherever, right, of this actually happening.
Or
right?
at least,
otherwise, I'm going to have to call it a UVA. I'm going to have to call the whole thing Jackie.
I would at least want to see something, if not like that, a police report that actually includes evidence where they're going to get a conviction or they have gotten a conviction, something along those lines.
Physical evidence.
Physical evidence. And I have no problem acknowledging that these kind of things do happen. No problem acknowledging that there are criminal elements within every population. But this idea of using accusations of criminal behavior against a basically tiny segment of an overall population, because 1,000 people is a drop in the bucket. I mean, like I said on Tuesday, Muslims are something like 1/7 of the world population, 1/6 or 1/7 of the world poppopulation.
The accusation isn't being made against 1,000 Muslim men. It's being
made against even smaller.
It's being made against Islamic culture.
Yeah, but the direct accusations, the incident itself that is being used to propel that narrative is a drop in the bucket in comparison to the size of the population that it's being used against. It'd be like saying if 5 guys in Toronto were accused of having committed a rape against a woman, that all of the men in Canada were rapacious by nature because those 5 guys were accused of doing something. And then going through and saying, well, there's been other rape accusations in other areas of Canada, so clearly this is a trend with Canadian men, And then if they went through and said, well, a lot of these guys that are accused of doing this are French Canadians, so clearly it's a French behavior. That's the same type of attitude that's being projected here. It's not an ethnic behavior. It's not even a gendered behavior. It's a behavior that is engaged in by a segment of the human race. And it starts with having the tendency to engage in violence as a means of bypassing other people's boundaries. That happens with people. It's a dysfunctional human behavior. It is not something to use as a broad brush to paint entire populations with.
Well, brief point about the culture is there have been, of course, admonitions from the government or other people in social sort of public eye who mentioned that some of these Muslim individuals, because of being in such a closed, covered up living situation that you have in the Middle East, once they have moved to more free areas in Europe, they see women in bikinis at public pools, and that just gets them going because they haven't really experienced that kind of sexual openness, and that kind of leads to more indiscretion than otherwise would be because of their culture in that sense.
I would definitely agree with that. I would say that essentially it is a culture clash, and there are issues with certain tenets of Islam that seem to be very popular among certain segments of the Muslim population right now, coming from specific regions. The kafir, the unbeliever being subhuman or subordinate, and therefore do what you will. ISIS doesn't tend to trade in. Doesn't tend to sell women into sexual slavery if they're good Muslims. They sell women who are not Muslim or who are bad Muslims, imperfect Muslim women into sexual slavery. I mean, like it's essentially there are certain aspects of the doctrines that are embraced at the moment by certain portions of the Muslim population that are extremely they would lend themselves to this kind of thing, which is why I don't think that it would have to be something like this. Could happen without it having to be a coordinated and pre-planned, premeditated thing. It could happen spontaneously, or it may not have actually happened the way it's been being portrayed at all. Right.
I want to point something else out too. It is also a known fact that there have been elements of ISIS that have used the flow of refugees as a cover.
Yes.
To get into various nations. So we know that there are people among the refugee population who are not refugees. They're not fleeing the violence in their own countries. They're actually trying to bring it to Europe. But that, again, that's a difference between the people who are fleeing, the people who are trying to get away, the people who don't want to be part of that and who are being murdered. And that's the other thing I'm going to point out, that the majority of the victims of violence from Islamic extremists are Muslims. It's not white people, it's Muslims. It's not Europeans, it's not black people, it's Muslims. Yeah. They're hurting other Muslims more than they're hurting anyone else. And to blame the refugee population for something that may have been done by extremists among them, to blame the overall population as trying to flee that situation without considering all the facts, without any skepticism, to just listen and believe, is really kind of bigoted. And it's not to say that all of these accusations are false or all of the behavior is justified or any such thing. It's simply a matter of applying the same standards to this discussion that you apply to any other discussion on this topic.
All right, we had a comment from chat, and it was a question about the response by Clementine Ford.
And Lori Penny.
And Lori Penny, but I have Clementine Ford's article pulled up right now, and I'll read a couple paragraphs. German authorities. This is quoting Lori. This is quoting Clementine Ford. Don't think this is coming from me. German authorities are currently reeling from a breakdown of public order after a group of between 500 and 1,000 men converged on Cologne on New Year's Eve and executed what appears to be an organized campaign of assaults against women in the area. Almost 100 women filed complaints of robbery, harassment, and sexual assault to police. It has been confirmed that one allegation of rape has also been made. Mass protests have followed the attacks, with women taking to the streets to express their anger not only at what occurred, but also at the feet-dragging response to it. That the attackers have all been described as being of Arab or North African descent has been eagerly embraced by the conservative commentators, anti-immigration campaigners, and garden-variety racists. And yet no evidence has emerged yet which suggests that this heinous, frightening activity was coordinated solely by new arrivals in Germany. Even if it were, wait a second, I just gotta have to interject here. It executed what appears to be an organized campaign, yet no evidence has emerged yet which suggests this heinous, frightening activity was coordinated solely by new arrivals in Germany. So what are you saying that what other group would be coordinating this?
Well, I want to interject something else too, because they've been referred to both as an unruly mob and a coordinated campaign.
Yeah, which is it?
Is it an unruly mob? Is it a coordinated unruly mob? Is an unruly mob capable of being a coordinated campaign? You know, is this an organized riot? You know, this is part of the reason why I'm so skeptical. They can't even get their narrative straight.
Well, nobody's, like, I have yet to find a news outlet that's actually reporting on this in a way that I would trust that they're not exaggerating or minimizing something. But anyway, let me continue with what Clementine Ford had to say. Even if it were, over 1 million people entered Germany last year. A portion of 1,000 of them accounts for 0.1% of that number. Okay, we covered that. Of course, small percentages and statistics are only relevant when they're being used to excuse crimes perpetrated by white men. What? Example, it strikes me as, small percentages and statistics are only, you mean like the percentage of actual rapists in the population. Okay, whatever. For example, it strikes me as deeply ironic that Breitbart, the conservative website that's eagerly taking up the cause of defending women from harassment in Cologne, is the same misogynist clusterfuck of a news source that has also devoted so much time to rallying disbelief over rape accusations on U.S. college campuses. Well, are they rallying disbelief over rape allegations by actual people, or the fucking statistics that you guys churn out?
No. What it is, and Matt Forney's blog, right? This cemented this in my head, right? Is that when you already have a pre-existing prejudice, right? When you're already just anti-immigration or you're anti-Islam or whatever, right? When this is your position, and the men in that group, in the out group, get accused of sexual misconduct, right? If they're in the out group, you're going to believe it. You're just going to fucking believe it. And you're not just going to believe it. You're going to believe it and use it as a justification to, boot all of those men out or punish them in some way or, eliminate due process. Or, it really is, it's this horrible, horrible marriage of sexism and tribalism that occurs, and it's not just on the right, it's not just on the political right, it's not just, but when you see people in the manosphere, the guy, Matt Forney, used to go by Ferdinand Bartomeu. That used to be his username. He was the one who wrote the article, The Necessity of Domestic Violence, that I made a few comments that, even though I made them like 6 fucking years ago, are still thrown in my face. Defend this, misogynist.
Okay, Karen, get to the point.
And he is saying, these Muslims are raping our women, we need to get rid of them, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
all right.
He's also falsely accusing Dean Esme of saying that none of the accusations could possibly be true, that they are all confirmed false, which is bullshit. That's not what he was skeptical.
Okay, but guys,
tried to have this kind of conversation on Twitter. Why would you fucking do that?
Yeah, there's nothing. You cannot have a conversation on Twitter that makes any goddamn sense. That's why I try to avoid it completely.
It regularly.
Oh, well, you might have the knack.
I looked at Dean's tweets. There is absolutely no way that he could have made tweets and not have them taken a bad way.
Yeah,
right?
it is really, really hard not to do that. But guys, I don't want to get too much into.
That's the thing is, in order for people to take your tweets that way, they already have to have made up their mind about you.
Of course.
That's what I'm saying about this guy. He's making a false accusation, and he knows it when he's doing it. It's not that they mistook what Dean said. It's that they had a narrative in mind, and they're using that, and expressing skepticism is not calling someone a liar. It's asking for evidence to back their statement.
Agreed.
All right, let's continue with the art. Let's continue with Clementine Ford's article.
Oh.
Yes.
Do we have to?
Apparently, yes, we do. Apparently, harassment of women is only real when it's being done by outsider men. All other complaints are part of a feminist conspiracy to castrate masculinity. Because it's so impossible to discuss the hypocrisies without being accused of apologium, well, actually, really what people should accuse you of, Clementine Ford, is hypocrisy. Hypocrisy. Or selective leftist outrage. I'll establish from the outset that what happened in Cologne was horrifying. To emerge to a such blah, 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 she just paints some picture, which is, she's basically editorializing. Yes, there are vital conversations to be had about integration of values when opening borders to mass migration, especially for people fleeing high-pressure environments defined by instability and oppression. But if the fervor over this is truly about protecting women, why is it only, how do people form their mouth around that phrase?
Yeah, no, but the furor over it is only about protecting women. What about the German men who were stomped? What about even just the people who were stolen from, who were robbed, right? Okay, no. What's everybody talking about?
Protecting the women.
We have now got some confirmed complaints, right? Not confirmed as in proven, but it's confirmed that there are complaints of some groping, some harassment, and one complaint of rape. Okay, days ago it was mass rape in front of the train station in Cologne, right? Multiple gang rapes, right? This is what I was hearing, right? And none of it centered on anything other than the sexual violence against women. So you know what? She's right. If the entire cultural conversation is going to be about protecting women, which it is.
All right, let's get a little bit further in. If this is truly about ensuring a world where women can walk down the street safely without fear of violation or assault, without risk of violence, of course, no concern about men. How is it that she advances this proposition and still has the gall to call her brand of feminism or whatever feminism as promoting egalitarianism? Whatever. Then let us also use it as a means by addressing what kind of values we want people to integrate into. Well, not groping people in a crowd might be a good one. But because disparaging attitudes towards women and our bodies are already a benchmark of Western culture. And yet...
the Muslims they just came over here, and then they watched how the white men behave, and they're like, fuck, man, these white guys, they got like a handful of pussy and a mouthful of ass every second walking down the sidewalk. I want some of that too.
Okay.
What does she think? That the Muslims are coming here and learning from the white men how to rape? What?
Yes, that's what No, actually I think it's more sinister than that, what she thinks.
My God.
We gotta get to it. We gotta get to the crescendo. But I just wanted to say one thing. This is allegations that have come out of a situation with a whole bunch of Muslim men. I don't know if there's any huge public groping that's occurred outside of this context in Germany. But maybe there has. I don't know. Yet discussing this, you'd imagine that Clementine Ford would mention it if there had been. But anyway, yet discussing this often encounters a very different kind of reception. Oh, but this was such a large scale, some people cry. Yeah, well, sort of. Show me where the Western men have hunted in packs this large. Yeah, that's a good question. If it's true that attacks of this size are a rarity. It's true that attacks are the size of a rarity. If Clementine Ford had found one in her Googling search that she probably did before she wrote this, she would have put it in. Yeah, for hours she was looking
Probably
for it.
back to it too.
Yeah, it's not a rarity. You couldn't find one, dear. Otherwise, you would have put it in here. However, behavior this blatant is not. Ask any woman you know, and she'll tell you about being grabbed on the What? I have never been grabbed on the street, at a pub, on a train, or in the shops. Please take your victimhood narrative and shove it in whatever orifice you prefer. Anyway.
I dress very provocatively, and I've never been grabbed either.
Yeah, no, she can fucking bend the fuck over so I can file her, her position exactly where it belongs. Because honestly, like, seriously, and I'm sorry, Anna Cherry is fucking hot, okay? I used to have a body where I had people actually ask me if I wanted to come model for them. And I've never been groped on the bus. I've never been groped on the street. I've never felt in danger on a public street. Ever.
I have, but not in an area where she's talking about, like just on your regular, walking downtown, walking through, very, very public, very nice neighborhoods. She's treating it like all men everywhere do this. I spent some time being a colossal dumbass when I was a teenager, and I hung out with people that I should not have been hanging out with. And I'm not really going to get in depth into that part of my life because it's a dark patch. But I've encountered that kind of behavior, and like I have pointed out in the past, it is a behavior that is mostly limited to people who have other criminal type tendencies or other violent tendencies. It's a behavior that you find when you hang out with a rough crowd. It's a behavior that you find when you you hang out with people who are already engaging in behaviors that are socially unacceptable.
Yeah, well,
this isn't something that you just run into from the general population of people. It's not something you just run into. Being male makes it happen either. I mean, when I was involved with the wrong crowd, I encountered all kinds of violence, not just that particular type of violence. So if we're going to make personal anecdotes a measure of this, from my experience, from my personal experience, you have to learn to judge people's character. Character matters, and it's an individual thing. It's not a group thing. It's not a population thing. It's not an ethnic thing. It's not a religion thing. It is an individual thing, and it should be treated as such.
Yep. And I have to amend that. I have experienced being sexually assaulted, but never in public. It wasn't quite the same situation as you, Hannah, but never in the shops, on the street, in the train. And I have actually gone to Germany, and I am astounded about her next anecdote. The anecdote after the next one. The first time I went to a nightclub when I was 18, a man walked past me in the dark and casually shoved his hand between my legs and cupped my genitals. What? Okay. All right.
It's impossible to do that casually.
And I went to a lot of nightclubs when I was a teenager, and this was back when, before the 80% decline in rape, so around 1986 when I was 16 and I looked, like I could pass for 18 and get into a bar, right? And I looked enough like my older sister, that I could just borrow her ID. Yeah, there was nobody got handsy. It just didn't happen.
Let's see, we have 4 women here. We have 4 anecdotes in which we went to nightclubs and this never happened. That's 4 times more evidence than you have, Clementine Ford. Your anecdote is nullified. All right, next
Lived
anecdote.
experience, my ass.
Yeah. The
Well, I
the
mean,
last
I'm sure there's like the odd woman who gets groped in a fucking nightclub. I'm sure it fucking happens. Okay, but it's not like something that happens to every woman. It's not like the universal female experience.
no.
All right, I got a
No.
thing to say about nightclubs too. This is kind of stupid. To make nightclubs to demonize nightclubs. You go into a nightclub, you're in a large crowd of people.
Yeah.
You know, this is the same thing as happened with Japanese women on buses. You get into a large crowd of people. Touching isn't necessarily intentional and targeted. You get into a large crowd of people, you bump into each other, you brush across each other as you're moving through the crowd. People who are dancing accidentally slam into each other, and sometimes on purpose, you know, if you're in a mosh pit. But I mean, even if you're not in a mosh pit, there is unintentional impact between bodies.
Okay, let me.
And it gets I've seen this happen. It gets interpreted as groping on occasion when it's not.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just going to give some context to this anecdote. The first time I went to a nightclub, I sat on the bar as I was flirting with the bartender, and then there was this man who came up, and while his friend distracted him and he was talking with him, he put his hand between my thighs. And then when he turned around and saw what he'd done, he was horrified with embarrassment because he thought he was reaching for a goddamn beer glass.
Okay, that's not groping.
No, I'm not saying that is. I'm giving it some possible context.
Yeah.
It was horrified. And he
Sitting
said,
on the bar.
"Do you have some bleach so I can disinfect my hand? It's touched Clementine Ford." Anyway.
Yeah, no, this is not to deny that groping can take place in a nightclub, but for crying out loud, the idea that going into places like where people are where people are socializing in large crowds, and nobody is ever going to touch you, it is just as stupid as the idea that you can't go out dressed like you can't go out dressed sexy and without triggering people to touch you.
Honestly, I can't even shove my tits up into my camera in a video without a whole bunch of people commenting on my tits in the comment section.
I'm a simple man. I see boobs, I press like.
All right. Okay. let's move on to the next anecdote. The
Well,
last
just here and don't let that stop you from doing it.
And I never will.
The last time I was in Germany, a pair of men walking behind me in the train station smacked my bottom hard as we walked up the exit stairs. Did they also say, "Move! Move it, Bessie! Move it! We got places to be, Bessie! We can't just sit behind you watching you
Is there like
back and forth!"
is there like some kind of aura around, like, you know, because let's give her the benefit of the doubt, right? And let's assume that these experiences, these anecdotes, are true and factual. There's got to be some aura she's giving off, some kind of, you know.
Perhaps the formula is the number of unsavory individuals with a tendency to trespass against your boundaries as a woman is directly proportional to the elevation of your nose when you look at them.
Because literally,
It does have that sort of quality of hitting the rich man's top hat off with a stone, doesn't it?
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, the way I have gone through life, you know, the evolution of my attitude towards other people, from the stupid teenage years to the adult years, I have noticed a difference in the responses that I get from people based on my attitude toward myself and my attitude toward other people and the way I carry myself. Now, I grew up learning to treat things like catcalls and stuff like that as more of a confirmation than a conflict. So it was easier for me to handle things like that. But I will totally admit that if I was behaving or looking more snooty, I was more likely to get that kind of treatment than if I just walked around being myself. Minding my own business, going about my day, not caring one way or another, not looking down on other people, not having a solicitous attitude toward other people, none of those things, just go through my day. And those things were just like a guy does, basically. Those things are less likely to happen to me.
Okay, I just need to say one more thing. I want to explain why I said this. I'm not saying this because I think she's a large woman or a cow because she's large. I'm saying this because I've been in Germany, and the only reason I could see a pair of German men hitting a woman's ass is to get her to move out of the way so they could be somewhere on time. That's it.
Yeah, no, and it's honestly like, but I can't even see that necessarily happening. I mean, like, and honestly, okay, so somebody smacked your ass, like, okay,
well, her life is over now.
Like, like, I worked in a place, in the Denny's that I worked at, all of the women, right? All of the female servers, they used to smack each other's asses, right? And it was just like this big joke. They'd always just go around smack each other's asses. And they would ask me, like, what? One of them, Leah, she's from the Philippines, she's like, why don't you smack my ass? Why don't you ever do that? And I said, because I would mean it. And that makes it a little different, right? You ladies, you smack each other's asses, you know that none of you want to actually fuck any of the others, right? So it's not really a big deal. But if I smacked one of your asses, I might mean it. And she's like, I don't even understand you. And then one day she smacked my ass, and I turned around and I gave her a good one, and she was like, oh my god, Karen, you smack like a man.
Okay, let's get a little further into it. Let's get stuck into it here. Stuck in. If you're tempted to dismiss these incidents as less frightening because they only involved one or two men, know this. What you're really saying is that there are circumstances in which women should have to... Yeah, well, actually, Clementine, you just put it with your description of what allegedly happened in the actual Cologne. Being groped by a crowd of men is actually more frightening than having two Germans smack your butt.
Yeah, no, like one guy takes a liberty in a crowd of people that you can mostly assume, if you screamed rape, would come to your aid, as opposed to a crowd of 1,000 men who, all seem bent on, having their turn with you. Yeah, no, I know what I'd be more afraid of.
I can't believe the hubris in this.
Oh.
I'm just going to read it again. If you're tempted to dismiss these incidents as less frightening because they only involved one or two men, know this.
Oh, dear God.
What you are really saying is that there are circumstances in which women should have to put up with having their bodies grabbed, as if it were no big deal, and that we only earned the right to draw the...
Saying that. Oh my God, okay, so being raped is worse than having your cell phone stolen. Okay, that means stealing cell phones is totally okay, and people should just have to put up with it.
Well, no, but just listen to what this woman is saying. Good Lord, there are circumstances in which women should have to put up with having their bodies grabbed.
Put up with
Let me finish the paragraph.
Much less bad than rape. And so what are you complaining about? Somebody stole your cell phone. You should feel fucking lucky that you weren't gang raped instead.
Like that. You know what? It's really very simple. If you object to the behavior, and the behavior is an assault, defend yourself.
Okay, let me finish this paragraph.
No.
This is an unbelievable fucking paragraph.
Just give me one more second. She is literally saying that saying X is worse than Y is the equivalent of saying Y is 100% just fucking peachy keen.
Well, I think what she's saying in the narrative is she set right-wing commentators up to be dismissing those other incidents and focusing on these incidents. But I still, if you're the way that she phrases this, if you're tempted to dismiss these incidents as less frightening, yes, I am, Clementine. I'm seriously, and I cannot believe that you had the gall to assert this, because they only involve one or two men. Know this. What you are really saying is that there are circumstances in which women should have to put up with having their bodies grabbed as if it were no big deal, and that we only earn the right to draw the line on it when those hands number in the hundreds. No. You can say that what you endured, allegedly, by being smacked in the ass and probably told to move on, is not in any way comparable to being groped by a fucking crowd of people. That's not. It's just not. It's not as frightening, and by saying that, I'm not saying that that means that it's okay that you were groped.
Or that it wasn't frightening.
Or that it wasn't frightening. It just isn't. There's perspective here.
Oh my God.
Why is assault only real when it's done by outsiders? Well, I don't know, Clementine Ford. Why don't you ever consider women assaulting men to be a problem? I mean, that's exactly the same situation here. I mean, according to you,
by outsiders.
According to you, the only reason why the right-wing commentators are considering this rape is because it's being done by Muslim men. Well, the only reason, like, do you consider it a problem that women rape men? Like, because you're just evincing the same thing. Well, maybe she does. I don't know, but probably not as big a problem.
And boys.
And boys. When it's footballers being accused of pack rapes, do we see outraged pack rapes? Do we see outraged mainstream voices calling? Oh, this woman just makes me want to die.
That's when you when you mail somebody a 40-pound box of rape.
Ah, a pack of rape. I see.
You know.
Don't open it.
Don't open it. I'm gonna no more rape puns for you, Hannah.
Okay, I might skip.
Am I being punished?
Oh God. I'm sorry. I'm just, we have a guest. We have a guest, and we haven't gotten to him. And
I know. We're just finishing up the article.
I can cut my own throat. Don't read the rest of her article. I don't.
Yeah, but we were requested. Okay, shh. The less you fight, the less painful it is. All right. It shouldn't escape notice that while the mayor of Cologne is being rightly criticized for her ridiculous comments urging women to stay safe by keeping men at arm's length, similar responses to public attacks are so often met with community support for common sense. There are conservatives who will not only crawl out of their holes to care about women if it means they can comfortably flex their racism as well. During these times, they love to criticize feminists, those people who actually do the long, painstaking, undermined and often combative work of defending men and fighting for a better world for all of us, of being ignorant about reality.
Did she just say defending men?
Women. I meant defending women. Okay. They will call these people things like rape apologists as if they have any idea what it means. All the while pretending their real concern is in protecting women from abuse. But it is. Okay, but it's so much easier to believe in a rape culture when it's those men over there. Yeah, and unfortunately a lot of white men can be convinced that every other white man is those men over there.
No, and then the imams are saying the exact same thing. They're like, all those white men over there, they have those Western men, they have a rape culture. Look at how they, make their women, like, display their bodies, and they sexually degrade them and, make them twerk and shit.
Okay, if they were concerned about protecting women from abuse, they wouldn't expend so much aggressive energy on the other 364 days of the year telling women that they're overreacting about their experiences or just plain lying. They wouldn't tell women who were groped in bars that it's just part and parcel of going out. They wouldn't insist that women take this kind of behavior as a compliment and make them feel if they can't, they aren't mature or rational to live in the real world.
Who does that?
What, is she talking about claiming somebody is telling women to take rape as a compliment?
No.
Or
Like being groped in a fucking bar or whatever, right? Like who take it as a compliment. Oh, it's just par for the course. It's just part of going out. Yeah, no. Who fucking says that? No, what people say is there are men out there, right? And they don't ever say this about women. They just say it about men, but they do say it about men. There are men out there who are bad. There are men out there who are bad and who will be bad and who are determined to be bad no matter what anybody tries to teach them. And so, right, in order to stay safe, you need to look after yourself. You need to keep an eye on your surroundings. You need to, stay safe because we care about your safety, and there are bad men out there. Now, nobody says this to men. Nobody says to men, there are bad women out there. There are bad women out there who will go off birth control without telling you and get knocked up and fucking shackle you to a $200,000 fucking baby mortgage, right? And put you in jail when you can't pay it because you lost your job. Oh, and they'll do all kinds of, they'll take half your shit, right?
There are people,
ruin you, right?
There are people who will acknowledge that behavior. They just don't call it bad. The only people who are calling that behavior out are men's rights activists. But in the general population, when people talk about that behavior, they treat it like it's justifiable.
Yeah, no, and so we look
a step worse.
She's literally taking an example of society caring about women, right? In a way that society does not care about men at all, right? Because we warn women about bad men. We do not warn men about bad women. We just don't.
Yeah. Right? I have a word about the whole conservatives and rape thing too, because this is an inaccurate portrayal of conservatives, and she's giving them more credit, honestly, than they deserve on the rape narrative. Conservative politicians do use rape as a threat narrative for political gain. They do promote the concept of not the concept of a rape culture, but the concept of a gynocentric attitude toward rape, and they do talk about what they can do about rapists in terms of the law, in terms of criminal enforcement. If you see a conservative running, for instance, for a prosecutor position, when anything from like the county prosecutor level all the way up to the like state attorney generals and federal attorney general positions, one of the threat narratives they present is that there's this epidemic of rape happening that isn't being already addressed by existing law and policy. And it's not limited to the left. That is something that both sides do, and conservatives do it from a standpoint of the idea that men are the head of the family and men are the stronger of the sexes, and men are responsible, good men are responsible for protecting all women from bad men because women can't protect themselves. And so they're basically the same thing as feminists in that right. In that description of the narrative. And feminists will demonize them and act as though they don't do that in order to promote politicians that they feel are going to give them more money, give their organizations more money. And the left does give feminist organizations more money. But conservatives are just as guilty.
All right. Thank you and let's move on to the next paragraph. Because the last two paragraphs are some real doozies.
Hurry.
Don't blame the messenger.
Ask any feminist.
Don't blame the messenger, Karen.
Don't let me interrupt you. Just read it.
And don't open the box.
I won't open the box. I'm going to mute you, okay, so I can get through this fucking paragraph.
No, you're not.
Ha!
I unmuted myself, bitch. All right.
If feminists are refusing to comment on Cologne is in exactly the way conservative racists want them to, it isn't because they want to make excuses for certain kinds of men. So I guess listen and believe just goes right out the window here. It isn't because we have become enamored of the multicultural experiment, refusing to condemn it, lest we be accused of racism, even though you, Clementine Ford, tried to pretend that you're getting an ass slapped is the same as allegedly being groped by 100 men in a fucking crowd. And it certainly isn't because feminists don't care about women. We are often the only ones who do care, and our voices are met with either vicious anger, scathing ridicule, or deafening silence. Oh, really? What feminists like myself are refusing to do is participate in the charade, pretending these things only matter, are only important, are only violent, indeed only become real when perpetrated by certain kinds of men. Wait. Okay, wait, can I just, I'm going to interject here. You just said, okay, so there's two possible solutions here. Either you're just like the conservatives, and your particular group of men that you say shouldn't be accused of rape is just different. Like a conservative, it's, you know, I don't think it's just white men. I think it's cultural men who are part of Western values. They would be skeptical that those men rape. You are skeptical that Muslim men rape, or you try to deflect from it, or whatever you're doing. How are you two groups different at all? As far as I can see, the only group of people that is holding every single group of rapists accountable, including women who rape, is us. We're not actually saying that it's not rape if a Muslim does it. Or, conversely, we're also saying, hey, let's let justice play out, and let's find out if this actually happened. And we're not saying it's not rape if a white guy does it. We're saying, let's let justice play out and see if it happened. And we're not saying it's not rape if a woman does it, as you guys are often doing. So as far as I can see, looking at all of the evidence, the only group of people who are actually holding rapists accountable as rapists is us. You just simply don't agree which group of men you don't think should be accused of rape or should be defended from rape. You disagree which group of men the alleged victims of should be listened and believed. You believe that women who are victims of white men should be listened and believed.
Okay.
Not victims of Muslim men.
Okay.
That's the only difference.
Okay. Shh. Okay, there's this thing. There's this thing with the oppression narrative with rape, right? Right? That rape is a tool of oppression. Right? It is a tool of the strong, of the oppressors, to use against the weak, the oppressed. Right? This is the feminist thing, right? That even to the point where all forms of oppression, racism, religious persecution, political oppression, all of that was built on the model that men discovered when they realized their penises could be used as weapons against women to oppress and subordinate them. Okay? So this is classic second wave rape stuff, okay? So you have this sort of narrative where the powerful rape, right? And they rape the powerless. So of course, if there's a minority, and a marginalized minority, refugees who are fleeing a war-torn country, right? Or Muslims in general, given the sort of the left-wing narrative right now, this sort of anti-Israeli narrative, and the we stand with Palestine no matter what they do narrative that's going on. I'm not even commenting on the validity of any of that, just that's what the narrative is in the left right now, is very, very pro-Muslim and sort of anti-Israel. Seeing Muslims as victims, as sort of as a culture, that they are in a subordinate position to whites, right? Well, rape is just like sexism. It's a dicking plus power.
Okay, it doesn't.
Dicking against your will plus power. That's why women can't rape in the feminist narrative, right? And they won't ever say it, but that's why, because it doesn't fit the oppression model.
Well, they acknowledge that, some acknowledge that women can rape, but it's just not the same. It's a, men's bodies have a way of shutting that thing down,
It's not even that the man's body has a way of shutting that thing down. It is essentially that there are no political ramifications to the act. There is no political baggage regarding sex that would make it so that a man would be unable to say no.
I kind of talked about this on the Tuesday show, too. There is a historical context for why the level of trauma that is attached to rape is attached to raping women. And that historical context isn't there for modern Western women.
No.
There was a time
Pregnancy.
There was a time when your virtue, your sexual virtue as a woman, was a determining factor in your ability to establish a social position, and it could affect you financially. It could affect your whole life based on who you could marry, who you could be respected by, and raping a woman would take away, if it was known that it had happened to her, it would take away basically her ticket, ability to use her sexual virtue as a bargaining chip. And feminists will treat that ability as a thing that was forced on women, when men never had even the ability to use their virtue their virtue didn't matter. They weren't seen as having virtue. They were automatically seen as a tainting force. So there was no loss of virtue. There was no loss of ability to position themselves socially. There was no stigma attached to it. And today, the stigma that women would have faced, say, in the 16th century, in the 17th century, that in the 14th and 13th century, those are two totally different experiences. That is not to say that rape is not a traumatic experience for people, but there is not a difference in the level of trauma experienced by men and women. They may respond to it differently. They may manifest different symptoms of that trauma. Men are not as overt complainers as women, and so men don't talk about the trauma they've experienced the way women talk about they don't express it, and some of them can't. Some of them don't know how to express it. They don't know how to identify the thoughts that would be able to describe that feeling and that experience. But the fact of the matter is, if you told me if I'd have lived in 1350, and you'd have said rape is a more traumatic experience for a woman than a man, I just said, okay, I can accept that. But if you tell me that now, I'm going to call bullshit, because at least in Western society, the stigma is not the same as it was back then, and it shouldn't be. And that's fine. It's not a bad thing that the stigma has been taken out of it. It's not a bad thing that women are not considered damaged goods because they've been raped. That's not a criticism of the change. It's simply a matter that feminists are living in the dark ages when they talk as though men don't experience the same damage that women experience when they have been raped by a woman.
Okay.
Well, but not just that, but the risks, because it wasn't just a social thing.
Okay, but Karen, before we get into that,
there was the possibility of pregnancy, right? Everybody's on fucking long-term birth control now. If you don't have that, you have the morning after pill, you have abortion, you have all these things. You can mitigate all of that. Men have the proverbial $100,000 baby mortgage when they get raped, right?
Yeah, or boys. There's been a case in the U.S. where an 11-year-old boy was forced to pay child support. Had a child support obligation imposed on him after being raped by an adult woman.
Yeah.
and she
Okay.
got pregnant. So
All right,
that's
guys, let's tamp down on the sidetracking, because
Okay.
I wanted to bring out another thing that she's essentially saying. I'm not condemning Cologne because conservatives don't condemn. I'm not condemning the rapes by the group of men that I support. And I don't think we should listen and believe their victims because another group of people is not condemning the rapes by the group of men that they support and believe you should, this is such fucking, but she's using that to excuse why they're not condemning this. And they're not recognizing it for what it is.
Well,
if it allegedly is this thing that it is. But anyway, listen, believe, right, feminists?
like she's got a point. She really does have a point that conservatives are making hay with it because it fits their narrative, right? But feminists are also making hay with it because it fits their narrative. Every fucking feminist I've seen interviewed over this incident has has said, oh, well, we shouldn't talk too much about Muslims because men in the West, we live in a rape culture, and men in the West rape women willingly, like the freaking 8 ways from Sunday. I was raped 7 times on my way to the radio station, right? This is what by men of our culture, not Muslim men of our Western culture. Rape, right? So, I mean, they're all using it. They're all fucking. This is why I can't trust a single fucking thing anybody says about it.
Yeah,
it's a threat narrative promoter. It's a threat narrative promoter calling out the speck in her neighbor's eye while ignoring the board in her own.
Yeah, well, it's more than a speck in her neighbor's eye, truthfully, but it is definitely a situation where I think she's just balled out using the fact that conservatives didn't support rape victims that she thought should be listened and believed. So she's not going to support rape victims that they think should be listened and believed.
Yeah, conservatives didn't stand with Jackie, so Clementine Ford is like, fuck them.
Yeah, fuck the woman who was raped and apparently or allegedly raped and presumptively.
In Cologne, yeah.
Yeah, the presumptive rape victim in Cologne. Fuck her.
I gotta point out something else real quick about that. This is not the only instance of criminal behavior, particularly sexual violence being used to demonize a group of immigrants. People have been doing that as part of the debate on illegal immigration in the United States for years.
Oh, even Trump did it.
For years, that the reason that we should object to illegal Mexican immigration is because they're going to rape our women. They won't talk about any of the other nuances of that issue, which I'm not going to get into because it's a very complicated issue.
So essentially,
but it's not. It has nothing to do with jobs. It has nothing to do with the Mexicans being exploited when they come here. No, they're going to rape our women.
Okay, so essentially what Clementine Ford is objecting to here is they aren't using the rape stocks right.
Yeah, they're not using
the rape stocks. This is not how we use our rape currency here. This is incorrect. This is an invalid use of the rape, the currency of rape, the political currency of rape. Those conservatives.
Rape culture narrative. You're doing it wrong.
Yeah, you're doing it wrong. Okay. Violence against women occurs throughout all cultures because patriarchy and misogyny thrive everywhere.
No, you stupid cunt. If that was the case, then women would be more subject to violence than men. 1 out of 3 women globally will be physically or sexually assaulted by someone in her lifetime. 1 out of 3 women globally will experience a groping or a slap or possibly something worse. Okay? 1 out of 3 women will experience at least that. As someone grabbed their boob or slapped them when they were getting mouthy. Okay? That's 1 out of 3.
All right, I hear
1 out of 1 men. 1 out of 1 men.
If there's a man in our chat, or I'm also watching the chat that a lot of guys from A Voice for Men go to, either of those chats, if there's a man in either chat that has never been assaulted by anyone in your entire life, speak up now.
Please.
There's a man listening to this video later who has gone through your entire life and has never had anyone hit you, never has anyone slap you, men or women. Nobody's ever slapped you, nobody's ever hit you, nobody's ever tripped you and gone, ha ha, no, nobody's ever done anything to you
No one's ever
violent.
pushed you on the subway, like
Nothing.
just kind of shoved you out of the way.
Comment and tell us comment and tell us how you've gotten to the age you are without ever experiencing any violent act from anyone.
It's actually fucking amazing that 2 out of 3 women have lived such an incredibly privileged life. Because, like Karen, you said, it would be 1 out of 1 men. In fact, we'd need a completely different statistical instrument for men. Because we could just assume every single man who did the study would have had some extreme form of violence enacted upon him. So in that case, you'd have to have a statistical instrument that determined the severity of the violence.
Or how many times.
Okay.
Oh, and if you're circumcised, you cannot claim to have never been subject to violence.
Yeah. Okay, all right. So the other thing is that violence against women occurs throughout all cultures. Clementine, if these had been German men, and there were German men who experienced violence in this situation, I believe some of them had to get stitches. They got stomped.
Yeah, they went to the hospital.
But of course, that's irrelevant to your narrative, right?
Right.
Because it's all about violence against women.
Yeah.
If these women had been men, it would be far more likely that they would have been raped and then also stomped.
Yeah.
In fact, I'd imagine that there would have been that if women were molested and had any kind of sexual aggression I imagine there's a couple men who have the same story, but they're not telling. Anyway, and yet in the West we have found countless ways to mitigate it, erase it. Violence against women occurs throughout all cultures because patriarchy and misogyny thrive everywhere. And yet, in the West, we have found countless ways to mitigate it, erase it entirely, or acknowledge it, but place the blame squarely on the victim's shoulders. Okay, I'm having trouble parsing this. Are you saying that we have found ways to mitigate and erase it? Or get rid of misogyny? Or are you saying erase it?
To make it invisible and to blame the women for the violence that's been committed against them. Honestly, what's the typical feminist response when an MRA says, oh, but men are more likely to be raped in America, and men are also more likely to be murdered and violently assaulted in America. And what's their response? Well, who's doing it? Other men. Well, what's that? That's just blaming the victim. And you're not even blaming the victim. You're just blaming his fucking penis because he has that in common with the person who victimized him.
All right.
So blame penis. Don't blame Canada. Blame penis.
Blame penis. All right. If you care about women, care about all women. If you condemn the attacks in Cologne, as you should, condemn also the same, less organized attacks involving the same violation of bodily autonomy that women complain of daily. How many times could you use the word complain? As you must. Women have the right to be protected from all harassment and violation. No, they
don't.
No, you don't, actually. Not just the kind you disapprove of. You cannot have it both ways. Okay, Clementine, forward. Let's do a little experiment. There were men who were assaulted in Cologne. German men who were assaulted in Cologne. I think I saw the stitches in the skull of one. They had to go to the hospital. Would you prefer that situation to the ones that the women endured?
Yeah. He grabbed my boob before he, took my purse.
Yeah, he stole my smartphone. It probably was a distraction so he could steal a smartphone. Wait, did we lose someone?
You for a second.
Oh, okay. Well, essentially what I said is, yeah, he grabbed my boob before he stole my smartphone. Probably the boob grabbing was a distraction for the smartphone stealing.
Yeah, that's a distinct possibility because that is a way that you can distract women that you don't necessarily have to distract men with. Women get offended when they're touched more often than men get offended because somebody's just touching them.
True.
So it's a lot easier to use that as a way to draw attention away from the fact that you're also taking their bag. You know, and that's the other thing. It's easier to rob somebody who carries all their shit in a bag on their shoulder than it is to rob somebody who carries all their shit in a pocket, because you don't have to reach into their clothes to take their shit. You know, and like I went from a purse when I was real young to a fanny pack because it would be attached and harder to take when I was a little older, to not carrying a bag unless I'm carrying a lot of stuff. You know, I carry one back and forth to work because I have things I do at work that I need to carry in a bag. But if you see me go to the store, you're not going to see me carrying a purse. If you see me just out and about, you're not going to see me carrying a purse. It's lugging around a bunch of unnecessary shit. And it makes you an easier target for people who go into crowds in order to steal. There's a difference between men and women that makes women more attractive targets for thieves.
Yeah, agreed. I just want to know, like Clementine Ford said, you should care about all women. Can I care about all women except for Clementine Ford?
I give you permission, Karen.
Now I want to point something else out too. This is from a news story that I don't know which news story it's from. I've been looking and trying to upload it. I can't seem to find it. But it's one that I read in the same day that the story came out, or the day after the story came out, in which one woman's experience was recounted in her own words. And she had been in an area, she had spoken to a security staff where she was, and they told her not to go into the area where the crowd had amassed because of the things that were going on there. And she went there anyway. And then she complained about what happened to her. She complained afterwards that I went into an area where there was a crowd of people who was reputed to be molesting women, and I got molested. How dare they? Why did you go there after you heard that? Like, that it's actively happening right now, that there's violence taking place in this area right now, that they're attacking people, that they're assaulting people, that they're molesting women, that they're ripping people off. Yeah. You go right in the midst of that, and then you're surprised that you're not exempt from it?
Yeah, no.
And I will bet you that somebody is going to cherry pick this part of our video to accuse me of engaging in victim blaming.
Oh, whatever. You know what? It's my fucking fault. I'll come out right.
That guy is going to hurt you.
All right, both of you.
Go right up to him and you let him do it, and then you bitch about it.
Guys,
you're a dumbass.
All right, remember, when you don't take turns, no one can hear anything.
All right. Well, I'm going to finish what I was saying. You know, when you get told that guy is going to hurt you, he is hurting somebody else right now, and you walk up to him and he hurts you, you're a dumbass for walking up to him. When you get told there is a crowd of people right now engaging in violence against other people, and you walk up to him and expect to be exempt, and you complain because you're not, you're a dumbass.
That's like going into shark-infested waters and then blaming the sharks. It's like, no, it's your fault, dumbass. You're the one that went there.
You know, their behavior might be their fault, but you taking a risk is your fault. And when it's not even a risk, when it's a known thing, this is happening here. You know, walk out onto thin ice and you fall through the ice. That's not victim blaming to tell you the sign said thin ice. You shouldn't have walked out on it.
Agreed.
All right, let's bring on our German friend.
Our German.
All right.
All right, let's make this a little bit more sausagey.
All right, crowd.
Let Brian speak.
I mean, since we're blaming penis for everything anyway, we might as well, earn it. So, welcome to the chat, Kraut and T. You can turn off your mic or turn on your mic, whatever, unmute. And I understood that you actually made a video about this event on your channel. I hadn't watched it. I just learned about it when I was looking at the chat while this show was going on. Go ahead and unmute, Kraut. I can't do it for you. Can you
Just
talk?
up at the top of the screen, right? Just hover your
Yeah, there you go.
Can
Yeah.
you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
we can.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Well, don't watch the video. The quality is pretty bad, actually. And don't be distracted by my English accent. I'm half English. I'm bilingual. So, what are your questions?
Can I
guess
be
you might
distracted
answer
for
them.
other reasons?
Oh, sure. What
Okay.
reasons?
We're just wondering. I'm wondering who is that your portrait is of?
Heinrich Heine.
Okay. All right. And also,
Yes.
you made a video about this. What did you cover?
I covered an article by a German feminist, and whilst I was listening to the article that you were covering, I mean Alison was covering, the one thing I noticed is how similar they were. I got it back up again and had to read it whilst Alison was reading it aloud. And I noticed how similar the wording was. It's almost as if there was some kind of central committee where the narrative was planned and then it was broadcasted out to the various different feminists all around the globe to publish it. It's pretty interesting.
I think that's what they call the hive mind.
Actually, it is entirely possible that there are organizations that foster communication between various feminist organizations, including feminist journalist organizations. I use the term journalist lightly there. So it's a possibility. Talking points, memos are a consistent thing within politics, especially, and it's been confirmed that they exist even within like more fringe areas of journalism in the West. So it's entirely possible.
The thing is, our political debates are usually very different to yours. They're different in every country. We talk differently. We have different talking points in our debates. This is the first time that I've noticed that the talking points were almost completely the same, both in the United States, in the UK, in France, and in Germany, and in Austria. They were so similar. They were almost exactly the same. There's just a few differences between the articles. And that usually, I don't really recall that ever happening before.
Yeah, and it's
I remember the Iraq War, I remember all sorts of things, but I've never seen the talking points being so similar. So,
Yeah.
the thing is, this third wave feminism, that really only came to our country about 2-3 years ago. And it hasn't been very successful, to be honest. I mean, they tried to establish themselves here by starting some kind of Twitter campaign called Aufschrei, and they failed miserably. I think one of them, Frau Witzozek, oder wie sie heißt, how she's called, published a book called Don't Stare at My Tits or something like that. And then just some other German feminists published a book called, well, Close Your Blouse. And that was it. And you didn't hear of them again for about 3 years or so. And now, suddenly, through this event, they're just so aggressively pushing themselves into the public sphere. The media in our country seems to have been a bit confused at the beginning when this happened, how to cover this story. And then the feminist opinion articles started appearing at the various newspapers. And then suddenly they took over the entire narrative, pushed themselves into the public, and now their narrative is dominating in the public.
I actually, I can actually attest to the fact that third wave feminism wasn't really a big thing in Germany up until.
We have our own feminists. We have Alison Schwarzer. We have her publication called Emma. She actually wrote an article when this in Cologne happened, saying yes, there is some cultural problems in the Arab world, and that these will most definitely have something to do with this. I prefer calling them American feminists, because that is essentially what they are. They're not really German. Their ideology is essentially all imported, and they're just ripped into it all the time, constantly.
Well, that's not inconsistent with feminist history either. Feminists have made a practice of exporting Western feminism, and particularly American feminism all over the world.
I'd call it American feminism, because since the Iraq War, pretty much any idea coming out of the United States has a bit of a sour taste.
And
around here.
modern feminism pretty much originated in the U.S., to be honest, and that's we're ground zero.
Yes, and if the adjective American can stick to this, it will probably have less success in Europe. That's at least what I believe.
And I'm holding in my hands a 212-page book, Capital Research Center's Guide to Feminist Organizations, and its contents are actually divided into types of organizations: activists and advocacy, working women, think tanks and research, young women and girls. There are different types of feminist organizations that target various areas of politics, and there are actually some feminist organizations that are communication hubs for other feminist organizations, and I suspect that what you're experiencing is coordinated within those.
I believe so too, but I believe it will be less successful, especially in a country that has been run by a woman for almost more than 10 years.
I hope you're right, because what they've done in India, I don't know if you've paid attention to
Please tell.
news coming out of India, but what they've done in India is take the country by storm. They pretty much blindsided Indian men and Indian
Essentially
culture.
upended the law so that an accusation is as good as a conviction. Like, the process is the punishment. And it's not just a punishment for the man. It can include his entire family, including minor siblings.
And,
Okay, Karen?
and yeah,
let Hannah finish.
Basically, they showed up with threat narratives that portrayed traditional Indian culture as an attack on women, and what they do, what these exporters do of American feminism, is they'll study enough of the culture to find where the women are dissatisfied, and they will exploit that dissatisfaction by treating it as a unique experience. They portray human rights issues within the country as if only women's experiences of them matter, and
only women can solve them,
and only men are responsible for causing them, and all men.
And only feminism can solve them.
And only feminism, yes, and only feminism can solve them.
Yeah.
And the next thing they start doing is altering law. Going through and lobbying for changes in law and policy.
That kind of narrative wouldn't stick here, because it sounds far too much like something out of East Germany. It really wouldn't stick here. But one thing I've noticed about 2 days ago, I was listening to the radio on my way to work. I'm currently in Austria. Was a report about the commemoration for the Nazi concentration camp Mauthausen, and they were debating I think it was a woman's right, a feminist activist from Vienna or something. I need to look it up and find it. I think she was proposing a special commemoration for the female victims of the Holocaust or something like that.
Oh, why?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's the
minority of the victims of the Holocaust. I'm sorry, they were. Every single genocide, majority male victims. I'm sorry, every single one.
How are people responding to that?
It kind of fits in the stereotype that if you want to get to the German, you remind him of the guilt of the Holocaust in a certain way.
The question is, though, how are people responding to that debate? How are people responding to the feminizing of that debate?
Well, the university campuses are obviously partially lost, especially considering, the almost stereotypical by now communications and sociology student. But yet mainstream, our country has been ruled by a woman, and not very well, I at least believe not very well.
Oh, I was going to ask you what you thought of her.
She's our Hillary Clinton. She's an opportunist. That's what many people are. Yes.
Do you remember? Do you remember that you must have seen that clip of she was up on stage with a bunch of
Throwing the German flag away.
Yeah, throwing.
I really didn't mind that too much. I mean, that's almost typical
It wasn't so much
for some people.
It wasn't so much
for people of that generation.
Karen,
that's pretty typical.
Don't fight with the guest.
No. What struck me about that wasn't so much her throwing the flag off to the side. It was the look on her face when she shook her head. Like, we don't have patriotism here. We don't have self-pride here.
I have to be honest and say that might be typical for people of her generation, especially when they grew up in East Germany. That's my assessment. The far better clip is from 2003. That's what a lot of people don't know, that back in 2003, when she was still in opposition, she wanted us to go to Iraq. And the thing that many people abroad don't know about her, she has no principles. She has nothing. She goes with the wind. Her policies change with public opinion. She is our Hillary Clinton, essentially. That's pretty much all there's to say about her.
So literally in 2008, she's like, I believe marriage is between a man and a woman.
Oh,
and
she still believes that.
And then like in 2014, she's like, oh, I support gay marriage. And
Exactly. We had, for example, do you remember the nuclear power thing in Japan? Yeah, in Fukushima, when that happened.
Yeah.
In Germany, we have a very strong environmentalist movement that advocated for shutting down nuclear power plants. And she introduced a policy in 2010 to open up nuclear power plants against, and public opinion was with her at that time. Mm-hmm. And she argued very strongly for it. And then the Fukushima incident happened.
Okay.
And she just reversed from one day to another and suddenly just said, well, within 10 years we will shut down all nuclear power plants.
Can I actually ask a question, Kraut?
Yes.
What is your opinion of this whole situation? I assume that you put it out in the video.
I'm still making up my video was mainly on that stupid feminist cunt.
Okay,
and her stupid video.
Because it's a lot of people have definitely made up their mind already. I know I'm not. I want to wait. In fact, I don't even know if it's really relevant, but I would want to wait until at least we see some semblance of a legal process before making a judgment.
Yes, exactly. I've noticed, especially in the far right in this country, that people have immediately started saying, "Well, we should deport them all," which is pretty stupid because we have a legal process. We have a legal process. If you commit a crime in this country, you're supposed to go on trial.
Exactly. What separates us is we're a secular democracy with a strong tradition of rule of law. You know what we're gonna the people who are really embodying that tradition, the people who really deserve the word traditional are the ones who are actually saying, no, let's wait for the law to figure this out.
Yes.
Well, but I can understand why because conservatives have been objecting for so long to the sort of the open borders thing.
Well, in our case, not. Remember, Merkel is conservative. She hasn't been objecting to it.
Well, she hasn't been objecting, but
the social conservative Bavarians have been objecting to it. But she has changed the face of the Conservative Party quite a bit.
See, that's something.
Well, I'm not talking conservative as in conservative party, but conservatives as in people of a conservative mindset.
Oh.
You got to differentiate between financial or fiscal conservatives and social conservatives because there is a huge difference there too. So,
yes, exactly.
And social conservatives in Germany.
Social conservatism is essentially dead in Germany because it is the Conservative Party in Germany up to the 1990s. It was run by the big old governors, people like Helmut Kohl, etc., etc. And she essentially rose to power through backstabbing the various people. And then once she was in power, she just chopped off the heads of everyone, took over the party, replaced most of them with people who just obey her, whatever she says. And the one thing that keeps her in power is she has put social conservatism out of the party book. There's no more rhetoric against gay marriage. etc., etc. But gay marriage is still not legal in the country.
Okay, well,
They just
So
don't
she-
talk about it anymore.
but what I'm saying is that when you're talking about social conservatives, when you're talking about people who are they're wary of large social changes, large, fast social changes. They are definitely like the people who are anti-immigration tend to be people who are leery of very, very quick, vast social changes to the social landscape. Like, there's going to be a huge change if you bring in this huge amount of people, if you open your borders, whatever, right? And essentially, she has decided now, like I was just reading today, right? Oh, we're going to look into maybe deporting some of these guys, right? Like, was deportation not an option prior to this, or what?
It was an option prior to this. I think what she has proposed in a typical Merkel U-turn is that the process for deportation will be faster now for criminals. That people who break the law in Germany can be deported much faster.
Well, I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing.
Neither do I, but it's a U-turn. It's not a principle.
Definitely. I have a question, because I have heard there has been a proposal by some feminist groups in Germany to basically start programs like we have in universities and other campuses in the United States where they're forcing guys to go to consent education,
I will
basically
find out.
re-education.
I don't know about that yet, but I will find out pretty soon.
Okay.
I will be starting university very soon, and if there is, I will let you know.
Yeah,
I've
I
spent
was
the last-
curious to know how the response to that is
But
going.
the thing about universities in Germany is we have we have a much more stricter education system than you have. If you go to university and study something like sociology or communications, people might actually look down on you. So people will try to go and study chemistry, polymeric chemistry, biology, microbiology, stuff like that. Stuff that will actually get you a job after college.
So you actually have a practical education system instead of the messed up system that we've developed in the United States with junk degrees.
I guess, yes. I believe ours is, I would go so far as to say that ours is the best in Europe.
Yeah, no, there's something to be said for German efficiency and Germans knowing the value of, productive work, as opposed to like mindless navel gazing and just like self-masturbatory, like philosophical fapping.
The courses are shut with a maximum. I don't know how to describe that. There's only a certain amount of students that can study a subject each semester. If too many get in, they get kicked out.
All right.
They are essentially told to study something else.
Okay, so
that's good, actually.
Brian has been waiting very patiently in the wings.
We don't care.
Yeah, well, I do. So Brian,
No, I
unmute
don't.
yourself. I know you don't care, Karen. It's
But I
very
don't.
well established.
Brian, I don't care.
Okay. I can
Okay.
take it.
All right.
Yes, your questions.
No, Kraut and T, I wanted to have a brief dialogue with you. First off, again, thanks for coming on and thanks for being so patient. And when you were talking about the similarity in the narratives, I was also reminded of video that the Young Turks put out talking about this situation. And one of the things that I noticed that was a common thread in at least all the stuff that we talked about was when these feminists and progressives talked about the events of Cologne, it seemed as though they did this thing where they would start off by talking about how terrible it was, where they say, oh yeah, it was a bad thing.
Oh, not.
I'm sorry?
Not here. The best thing about the article I have here, I don't know if you know the German magazine Der Spiegel, their feminist is Margarete Stokowski, and she starts her article with "Es ist zu ekelhaft." It is so disgusting, and you would think she's writing about what happened in Cologne, but no, she later writes she's disgusted about the people who are angry over what happened in Cologne.
Well, that's funny because that's what I was getting to. They start, like, a lot of the stuff that I saw starts by talking about Cologne as if to, like, sort of like set the stage, but very quickly uses mental gymnastics to get to ways of either essentially standing in opposition to the right or to people who might be, could be framed as Islamophobic, and also to essentially try to paint the picture that the events of Cologne on New Year's, that specific event, is somehow no different than anything that happens globally all over the world. So they would say they would start talking about things like the 1 in 5 rape statistics, not only in Germany, which apparently there was a study done in Germany that comes to the same numbers that the ones in the U.S. do, but they also talked about, they went from there to the U.S.'s 1 in 5 stat, and then they went to talk about things like, blaming the victim and how she dressed and how it's a rape culture, and then they went back to Cologne and they talked about how what the events there had nothing to do with Islam or Muslims, but it was about men. So it was basically it took a problem that maybe conservatives would have often framed as a Muslim problem, and they may have done it because, again, they've been getting, for the most part, I would say, shouted down a lot, and their media space is much smaller. They took their arguments that are often seen, and then they made it into a problem that isn't an Islam problem, but it's just a man problem. It's just a problem with men in general. Yeah. And here's a whole bunch of evidence that shows that what's happened there is not something exclusive to those people, because that would be racist and gross, but rather this is something that all men are capable of doing anywhere in the world for any reason. This is why we have segregated train cars in Japan. This is why we have, the stuff going on in college campuses, and this is why we have Bill Cosby, and it gets to the point where you actually, the way that they do it is you almost forget that the Cologne incident is an extreme, incident. You see it as part of a larger problem.
The difference with mine is that it is one continuous rant right from the beginning. I'm so sorry about what happened in Cologne. I'm so disgusted what happened in Cologne. No, it's just one immediate continuous rant about you, and that's the difference. It's about you. It's directed directly at you, because in that article, I have to look it up, she says, so baut sich jeder nach seinen Mitteln Erklärungen zusammen, überall, wo nun aus besorgten Bürgern edle Ritter werden, die unsere, also ihre Frauen beschützen wollen, die eigenen Frauen will der gute Deutsche immer noch selbst belästigen dürfen. So she writes, everyone builds himself his own explanations. Concerned citizens turn into white knights who want to protect their women, because the good German still wants to reserve the privilege to rape German women. Essentially writing, yes, the German man is only angry because he didn't get to rape the women who were raped and molested in Cologne.
Oh my fucking God. Oh my...
Okay. So, yeah.
But the best part about this, this is something I might, if you allow me to interject.
Oh, yeah, please go ahead. I'll say something after you're done.
Please.
Yes, she leaves a lot of links, etc., etc. Some of them are statistics, rather dubious statistics that cover the entire European Union and not just Germany specifically. But the best thing is, and that's the best part of this entire article. She writes that sexual violence is part of German cultural heritage, and she adds a link to that, which is supposedly a source to back up her claim. You click on the link, and the source is a Vice Germany article.
Oh, God.
Also opinion essays, so opinion essays are apparently sources now. And the title is Die Rape Culture wurde nicht nach Deutschland importiert, sie war schon immer da. The rape culture was not imported to Germany. She was always there. How the fuck can something be part of German cultural heritage when there's not even the German word for it? Rape culture. You know,
Yeah.
the German word for that is Vergewaltigungskultur. And
Well,
it just
that's
so obviously shows that this is just all imported from the United States. It's so blatant.
Something that you can tell people when this comes up in debate. Rape culture is a term that was swiped by feminists to describe something that they wanted, a narrative they wanted to promote, but it was swiped, it was stolen from a discussion of what happens to men in American prisons. It had nothing to do with the public. In American prisons, it's tolerated. The idea is tolerated that part of the prison experience is that you're going to get raped by other prisoners if you're not bigger and stronger and tougher than they are. And that was what rape culture was coined to describe. And feminists saw it and latched onto it and took it and kind of shut down that discussion for a while and overshadowed it with this narrative that they wanted to promote. And that's the phrase that they've spread all over the world for their narrative since then.
one other thing I wanted to mention was you were talking about Angela Merkel and how the fact that she's a woman could make was it? And I just wanted to, I don't want to misquote you or say this wrong. So, were you saying that the fact that she was a woman may make it more difficult for feminism to like really get a foothold?
Indeed. I remember the first day she assumed office, the interview she gave in the Chancellor's office, and I think there was some feminist there who asked her, "Oh, what does it feel like to be the first female Chancellor of Germany? What does that feel like? How great do you feel? What will you achieve?" And she just said, "Well, I'm just going to do my job." And she's not a feminist. She grew up. Yeah.
But that won't stop feminism from working its tendrils into the culture.
Well, they will have to debate their way around her. She made a woman the Secretary of Defense. She made a woman the Education Secretary. She made a woman. She just, you know.
No, I don't doubt it. It's just the way that it works. It corrupts from the inside out. And there have been many women, women that had powerful positions of responsibility in the U.S., in the UK, and they've been, the feminists are no fans of Sarah Palin. They're no fans of I forget the prime minister's name off the top of my head.
Margaret Thatcher.
Margaret Thatcher. They didn't like her. So
Margaret Thatcher said that feminism was poison.
Yeah.
She achieved more for women's rights in Britain than any feminist ever did.
Oh yeah, but that doesn't stop the UK is pretty much a feminist. It's a very much a feminist country though. At this point, they may actually have it worse there than we do here, even though it started here. But I don't know.
The significant difference between German politics and politics in every other country in the world is: do you know what Merkel has her PhD in? In nuclear physics.
I would say
nuclear physics. I don't know. It's something about nuclear parts in chemistry or something like that. And the thing about German politics is they're almost all academics, and not just some communications degrees academics. You have doctors, chemists, physics professors, etc., etc.
Everywhere else.
It's very elitist. It's very elitist, and it's very hard to get in there. If you want political power in Germany, you have to start up with being a governor of a state for at least 8 years and doing a very good job. Someone like Obama would have never been elected in our country. You really need to kind of produce a political resume. And I don't see a bunch of college students communications degree students who've never worked a single day of their life until their dentist mummies and daddies financed them for college, taking any kind of position in Germany. That will simply not happen. We are a very ruthless society. We are a society where you either work or die. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
I want to point out something else that happened in the United States with regard to feminism and its takeover. They did not have the level of power that they have today in the 50s. They didn't have that level of power in the 40s or the 30s. What they did was during the 60s, they created an academic study of their narrative. They first started with a class. The class was called Women's Studies. And they spread that class. They got funding from left-wing philanthropic organizations to promote it. And they spread that class throughout American academia. And this was at a time when it was more common for Americans to the reason you went to college was to get a job, because not everybody could afford to go to college. There wasn't the level of financial aid to go to college that exists today, and it wasn't standard for people to get that level of education. And it was at that point in time that they introduced women's studies, which was basically Feminism 101. And they've expanded that now into a course of study you can get a degree in called gender studies, which and it's essentially Marxism with gender replacing class.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I'm actually pretty scared of it coming here.
And that would be a way that they could probably start inserting feminism into.
That's what I was thinking too. Like through
that's
academia.
where they go through academia.
Yeah. Also, they need a group of people that can be framed as an oppressed class.
Well,
so
the rest of that is women's studies doesn't just infect people who focus strictly on gender. It became a thing that you took if you were going into education. It became a thing that you took if you were going to become an educated journalist, if you were getting a degree in any of the medicines that come out of the social sciences. You took women's studies. You know, you had to you wouldn't be able to understand and serve women if you didn't take women's studies. And that was it was a very subtle step-by-step process there. And eventually, you know, you had to take women's studies to get a business degree. You had to take women's studies to be taken seriously in any profession that women can say women are underserved in, or at least feminists can.
I call that the professional activist. I have my own theories on that thing. The thing is, I'm a high school dropout. I spent 4 years of my life getting up at 6 in the morning and working from 7 in the morning to 2 p.m. and then spent the rest of the day from 5 p.m. to 10 at night school so I could get my university entrance diploma. I pretty much know what it is like to be at the bottom income stage. And what I've noticed during my time there is that the professional activist, the individual who goes to college, comes out with a communications degree and becomes a pundit, a political pundit or a professional activist that goes from protest movement to protest movement to essentially force their narrative onto that movement, poison the movement, steal the voices of those who actually genuinely need to bring their message across. So these people are essentially parasites, you know, professional activists, and protest is essentially dead as long as these people live.
Yeah.
People who are actually on the bottom never get to share their voice, and that's why I'm especially scared of that movement coming to Germany.
Yeah, what happens with that is they once they get their mentality into all of these areas, it becomes impossible to get an education that's untainted by feminist indoctrination. It becomes impossible to read news reporting that's untainted by feminist indoctrination.
We don't have your news media. That's one thing.
Yeah.
If they want that to be successful in Germany, they would have to bring your kind of news media to Germany, where it's just opinion after opinion after opinion. German news, if you switch on the TV and watch it, it's just an old man going, "Hello, this is the news. This happened. This happened. This happened. This happened. Gute Nacht. Here's some Wetter. Auf Wiedersehen." And that's it.
What facilitated that in the United States is yellow journalism. And yellow journalism is sort of the exaggeration of points within a story to get an effect from the
emotional response.
To get an emotional response from the reader.
Yeah, and so I'm really scared of getting.
It makes it a lot easier to avoid ideological journalism.
I see that creeping into the papers, which were usually very respectable big papers like Süddeutsche Zeitung and Der Spiegel increasingly pushing out these worthless opinion essays, which aren't news at all. But I'm not so concerned that this is a good platform to kind of creep into the national news media, because I believe they're dying, and they essentially adopted it as a death throw before they completely fall over.
Well, see, that is something. When different ideologies used journalism in the United States that way, print media was pretty much the only media. When there was television media by the 20th century, but yellow journalism started in print media, and print media is kind of dying in a lot of different ways because of the internet, because of the rapid availability of internet media, of video media, and even radio media is not doing what it did before, except in limited areas. So
Yes.
it may act as an insulator. But those are areas to sort of keep an eye on, to sort of watch your education system, the journalistic reporting, how it changes and things like that. When you start seeing stuff like that happen, you're seeing an organized creep of ideological invasion.
Yeah, that's exactly the feeling I got after Cologne. That's exactly the feeling I got. Because you could see the at first it appeared as if they didn't know what exactly to write, and then suddenly out of the blue this feminist narrative, which was completely American in its entirety, narrative-wise, argumentative, etc., it just pushed itself all over it, and it stayed there for at least 2-3 days.
The last thing I'm going to say before I have to go, because I have to go to work, is it might help insulate at least the people around you that you could talk to and everything. It might help to insulate a little bit against this by pointing out.
I've noticed that on social media it was just mercilessly mocked by the majority of people,
but
except for on Twitter or Tumblr.
Pointing out the similarities to the way in which Nazi ideology crept up on people would help. It's a great way to warn people what's happening. The fact that they use a threat narrative, that they're demonizing one group for the sake of basically making people comfortable with ideas and choices that they wouldn't be comfortable with if there wasn't a demonized group at the center of the narrative. But it was really, really good talking to you, and I wish I could stay and continue with the rest of the group.
No problem. No problem. You can add me on Skype if you want to continue this conversation.
Yeah,
definitely.
We'll make sure to get his information.
Yeah, and just let me know your information. If I don't get your information, I'm at Onero's Grip, and I'm going to put it in our chat before I go.
I'm putting it
in
the chat right now.
Okay, that'd be great.
But I think actually that's a great point to end off on. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I was going to ask about the whole. I'm sorry. How
okay, you can figure it out.
No. It was the conversation that we were having before we started the show. We were talking about the ways in which Islam could be seen as gynocentric, like the arguments. That
I remember what you were saying. So you're talking.
Yeah, because because typically, this is the thing, okay? Obviously, when I looked at stuff made from feminists and progressives and the Young Turks and stuff, their agenda had nothing to do with presenting the things as they were. They just wanted to do damage control so that because they were afraid that that Islam or Muslims in general would get too much flack from the events of that, I guess what they would consider an isolated event. And of course, the conservatives would come out and they would, find like ways of, well, this is an example of why we need to take maybe extreme or drastic measures to get rid of them all, because we're in danger of that happening to us. And then there are people that are closer to reasonable, like, and I'm not to pick on anyone, but I watched like Straughan of Akkad do a video where he was responding to the Young Turks, and he talked about, and there are even like some atheists, like Sam Harris, for example, who have said, these are the ways. The one of the reasons why we need to be critical of Islam is because specifically they're harmful to women and homosexuals. But they will mainly focus on women.
Yeah. That, if I may interrupt you, that's something that has been very much forgotten. The homosexual. I mean, I'm myself active in trying to get gay marriage legalized, and one story that wasn't at all covered is that gay Russian, Georgian, and Belarusian refugees who came to Germany to claim asylum because back home they would be prosecuted, were assaulted in refugee camps by Syrian refugees, and that there was some, and that I have an Afghan.
It was men. It was men.
Yes, I have a Afghan friend, a gay man who came here 4 years ago, and he was weirdly enough the one who was the most vocal about not accepting any refugees to Germany, because he said, well, "Do you know what they do with gay men in Afghanistan? They lynch them."
Yeah.
So he was the most concerned about that.
Yeah.
No, it's literally you have something like 35 countries in the world where male homosexuality is illegal and female homosexuality is not, and no countries where the opposite is true. And in many of those 35 countries, male homosexuality is punishable by death.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to mention, Brian, in the altercation that I had with skeptic feminists, they were actually referring to 3 different religions: Islam, Christianity, and
Judaism.
And Judaism. And I said that I really can't speak to Islam or Judaism because I haven't really studied their holy texts. And I said, when they said, well, Islam is misogynist, I said, or gynocentric with a question mark, in order to invite the question of, let's look at the other side of the coin. But I never really was.
Like you didn't actually hold that position?
Well, I didn't. I cannot talk on something that I haven't researched.
Okay.
And I can, and I have talked on something that I have researched, and Islam is largely gynocentric, and that's why it's patriarchal, is because it's gynocentric. If you set up a class of people to serve another class of people, the class of people in the position of serving, of earning, of protecting, of providing, of making everything safe, of making everything easier, of giving this other class of people everything they need. Well, you know what? You have to give that class of people who are in that position, you have to give them the tools required to do the job, which means you have to give them the right to go outside of the house, you have to give them the right to work, you have to give them the right to earn money, you have to give them the right to do all kinds of things.
Like
right?
drive a car.
Yeah. And you know what? And you have to give them the obligation to drive her wherever the fuck she wants to go, whenever she wants to go there.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially what happened is that they latched onto, because they were referring to multiple faiths, and I said, well, I can't really speak to Judaism or Islam because I haven't studied their holy text, but I can sort of speak to Christianity and what's in the actual Bible, the New Testament. And you could make the argument that it is gynocentric. I mean, strong argument. When pastors tell the men of their congregation that they need to sacrifice for the wife as Christ sacrificed for the church.
Died
To protect his, you have to die to protect your wife. You have to constantly consider her providing and protecting and benefiting her a holy calling. And even though it says a woman must submit to her husband, she's essentially submitting to someone who has agreed that her benefit is his holy calling. That's not much of a active submission, I think.
Well, yeah, I wanted to also mention something else. One of the ways in which Straughan was making an argument about the whole Islam thing was he showed a video clip, and in his video clip, it was kind of a longer one. He had an Islamic priest, as it were, talking at great length about the rules of hitting women when you can do it. and there were all of these rules. And as I was watching it, and I think the idea was I was supposed to be appalled because there was talk about this is when these are the conditions under which you it's okay to hit your wife, and these are the rules under which you do that. And it was all, but there was all of these rules around it, like you can't do it, you can only do it as a last resort, you can only do it, you can't like hurt her face, it's got to be, your hand can't go over your head, and all these other things. And of course, initially my gut said, oh, that's really fucked up. But then I stopped for a
second. You realized there was no rules against Muslim women hitting their men.
Nope, there were no, that's exactly it. I was like, wait, but there are no rules for...
No. It's not even grounds for divorce.
No, and when a man hits his wife, he can't really do it because she's hit him. The one thing is, the guy, I believe he said, you can only do it as a last resort. The only thing that was probably really messed up about it is you can do it if she denies you sex. And I mean that was probably the worst part about it.
Yeah, but you know what?
There were no what?
You know what?
Yeah.
A husband denying a wife sex is grounds for divorce, right? So and grounds for divorce. Here's the thing. In Islam, you have something called a mar, or sometimes in Iran it's called Maria. In other cultures it's called the mar, and it is the bride gift. It is usually it averages about $50,000. And what it is it's mostly a paper debt, right? So you essentially have a man and a woman contract to marry. They sign a contract, and he pays her. He gives her maybe $2,000, $4,000 worth of gold coins. That is her security. That is there to ensure that she will be able to support herself and have a comfortable life if he dies or if he leaves her or whatever, right? He gives her this down payment, and the rest of it is a debt that she is legally able to call in whenever she wants while they're married, and particularly if she divorces him with grounds for divorce, right? She can call in the rest of that debt. And if that's not paid within a few months, the entire sum total of it, right, he goes to jail.
Okay. What I would like to interject.
So essentially, you have a situation where a woman whose husband doesn't want to have sex with her, and he doesn't have sex with her, that's grounds for divorce. That's grounds for her to say, you know what, I don't want to be married to you anymore. Pay me $47,000 within the next 3 months. Now, I don't know. I think a woman in that position wouldn't need to beat her husband to get sex out of him.
But they probably do still. Okay, Kraut, get in there.
You wanted to say
about the Straughan clip. The one clip that I believe should be shown more wider, several series of clips, is stock footage from Afghanistan or from Pakistan from the 1960s and 1970s. The one thing that many of us don't seem to realize is that this Islamic right-wing clerical fascist movement that is currently threatening the Western world that much is only 40, 50 years old.
No, it's one of the biggest things when the Taliban came into power in Afghanistan and they essentially confined women to their homes is that 40% of those women were educated professionals.
Exactly. Look at the stock footage from Afghanistan from the 60s. They don't wear veils. And I know, for example, that back in the 60s, hippies from Europe would like to travel to Afghanistan to buy their weed there.
Mm?
It was a pretty secular country. Wahhabism, this ideology that Saudi Arabia is essentially spreading, has its origins not in the 6th century, but in the 17th century. And the idea that all of this is Islam in itself, the entire religion, is in itself wrong, because there is no Islam. Just like there is no Christianity. There are so many denominations of, I hope I say that right, of Christianity.
Christianity.
And the exactly same is for Islam. You could go to Africa. and you see them dancing.
Go on.
Go ahead.
Oh,
I muted her, not you.
yeah, I kind of lost the thread.
You were talking
Yeah,
about.
there's so many. There is a mission of Salafist dominance coming out of Saudi Arabia. We always seem to forget pretty often in the West that the most people who are killed by the Salafists are other Muslims who happen not to be Salafist, who happen not to be clerical fascists. It's Sufis, it's African Sufis, it's Turkish Sufis, it's Pakistani Sufis, Pakistani Shia, Indian Sufis, Iranian Shia, of course, Arab Shias, Alawites. This is the main victim group of this. There's a civil war currently going on within the Islamic world between the diversity where regional cultures from Pakistan to North Africa mix with Islam to produce their own regional religious cultures, and that fascist force in Saudi Arabia, which essentially says, yes, you either adhere to our version or you don't adhere to any version at all. You either adhere to a version that we proclaim to be the most purest, where music is banned, where the women have to be completely veiled, where dancing is forbidden, where people are beheaded for drinking alcohol, etc., etc., or you're an unbeliever. And that, I believe, is more or less the context in which we should be more thinking about this, as not a conflict between Western values and whatever values we may perceive are the only right ones, and the Islamic values, which is, I believe, the wrong word to describe it. It is more a civil war in the Islamic world that has unfortunately been exported to Europe. Okay, I'll shut up now.
No,
That was fascinating.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think that one of the problems is that Saudi Arabia is pretty much the wealthiest of all of these Islamic countries. They're sitting on a ton of oil. They've driven the price of oil below $30
This is something
a barrel.
I can speak to. Saudi Arabia, there's a very small percentage of people who are related to the royal family who have wealth.
Yeah, they're all
an incredible
rich
wealth. Everyone else has nothing.
Yeah.
There's something I'm trying to look up, and that's a book. The one thing I could do at night school was read a lot in the local library, and there's a book by a Ukrainian historian who pretty much summarized it.
You want to look it up? And I want to get Anna Cherry.
Yeah. His name. Yes, please.
No, I was going to say I want to get Anna Cherry's opinion on the whole, is Islam gynocentric argument, or can it be argued that it is, rather than, I don't know, like just.
Okay, I can make one quick statement.
Yeah, sure.
To that. The only way you can convince men to expend their lives like this is by convincing that there's something valuable, more valuable than they are. And what the hell is that?
That's women.
There's women.
I mean, like, some atheists would say it's God, but what are these guys killing themselves for?
Okay, yeah, for 72 virgins, but there's also another factor, and that is, I don't know if this study is accurate anymore, but 97% of all women in Egypt, for example, have mutilated genitals. And there is this weird religious obsession with sex. I think Stephen Fry explained it the best when he said, yes, that sex is like food. You have different flavors, etc., and it's a drive. You need it for life. And only the morbidly obese and the anorexics are obsessed with sex. And within Islam, you have that sickly obsession with sex, and which comes with the idea that both women and men are not allowed to get any kind of pleasure out of sex, hence the genital mutilation of both women and men. I don't know how much I can fit this into the gender debate.
Well, there's actually I can fit that. There's two things on that. On one hand, you have women who believe that it is part of their rite of passage to actually get their clitorectomy or whatever it is they do with genital mutilation. So women, in fact, themselves are, particularly in North African countries, they request and they feel denied a rite of passage if they do not get that done. And on the other hand, of course, going back to psychology, there is actually proven studies that if you're told not to think about the pink elephant, specifically they were using that as an example, if you're told not to think about something, and then people measure the reaction, like basically press a button when you do think about the pink elephant. We're telling one group, don't think about it, and we're telling the other group, you can think about it, you cannot think about it, but just let us know whenever you do. And so they found that people who were expressly told not to think about it obsessively press the button because their mind can't help but go to that thing that they're not allowed to think about. And that has parallels with sexuality, and that has parallels with homosexuality in Christian homes. Basically anything that you're not allowed to think about, the brain actually obsesses a lot more over that. But if we're ready to have my take on it, I can do that, or we can go back to Crowd and his book recommendation.
Please continue.
All right. Well, we mentioned the women being covered up. And that, if you think about it, male bodies are so commodified, and their attractiveness or just the privilege of looking at them is denied to all men except their husbands. I mean, how can anyone twist that into a male-dominated thing when it is 100% valuing this woman's skin and her body, and that no man is allowed to look on it? So, in fact, it is more against men than it is against women in that sense. Now, if we're going to talk about also, some people raise issues that, okay, well, the Quran says that it's okay to hit the woman, it's okay to do this or that. Well, a lot, actually, in fact, what the Quran does focus a lot on is the interdependency and kind of a complementary relationship between men and women. And as Karen was saying, yes, men protect and provide and drive them around, and in return, women provide some things as well, like sex or whatever it may be. So it actually is a more healthy relationship than in other more gynocentric religions, like Christianity, for instance. It actually is a healthier kind of view on the yin and yang, on the compatibility and working together of the two sexes. Now, going back to like Muhammad, for instance, he was greatly concerned with women's rights. And he was extremely successful social reformer, as well as a spiritual political leader who basically championed the rights of the weak and the oppressed. And when men and women in the Islamic sort of religion are considered spiritual equals. So there's a lot of focus on them actually being equal. And then on top of that, men are also supposed to do these things for women. And yes, for instance, the polygamy thing is a big deal, right? Muslim men are allowed to marry multiple women. Well, it actually stipulates that a woman can stipulate how much money, for instance, he has to give to the other wives, or even if she doesn't want that polygamy situation, she can absolutely stipulate that it's grounds for divorce. So if he takes other women into his life, which of course monogamy is actually the norm, not polygamy. But for anyone who thinks that it's a patriarchal, construct that you have polygamy here and there all over the place, like no, women actually have the right to divorce their husbands if he takes on more than one wife. And so on top of all of these things that we have men and women being equal, specifically as stipulated by Muhammad and in the Quran, on top of that, men are allowed to do certain things, required to do certain things for women, such as, yes, specifically drive them around. There are feminists who say that we need to liberate the women of Islam and let them drive themselves around. And women of Islam say, fuck no, we like being driven around. Those men are our servants. Fuck off, please. And all of that combined, we do have kind of a gynocentric, women are more valuable because, they have to prevent men from looking at them. And of course, why do men blow themselves up for the 72 virgins or 62, however much it is? So in a variety of ways, there is emphasis on equality, and then some on how men are supposed to give to society and to women in general. So it very much is, if not necessarily 100% gynocentric, because I haven't done enough research to say that it is, but I mean, it really is leaning in that direction for sure.
Well, I think that most cultures are going to be gynocentric and male dominated, right? That's essentially what, like, the the gynocentrism is where the male dominance comes from. right? Because women require it. If you have a gynocentric society that requires men to be in a position of strength, potency, ability to, serve, to protect, all of those things, right? If you have a military class and you demand of that military class, you're going to keep me safe night and day, well, the military is probably going to be in charge, right? And that's essentially when you have a gynocentric society that's completely focused on the provisioning and the protection of women, you end up with male dominance. That's just what happens. And it may not be, it may well be that the male dominance preceded the gynocentrism, but the gynocentrism is there. It absolutely 100% is there. And when you look at how how balanced things are in the Islamic world, in traditional Christianity, in traditional Judaism, right, between the duties, the responsibilities, and the rights and entitlements of each sex, right, they're fairly evenly balanced, right? Not in the sense of the men are equal to the women, but the women's responsibilities are roughly equivalent to their entitlements, and the men's responsibilities are roughly equivalent to their entitlements, right? And that's how things just were arranged because of biological necessity for the longest time. One of the things that I wanted to get to, though, is Saudi Arabia in particular, being such a wealthy country, not in terms of all of its citizens, but a very, very, very minute and tiny elite of its citizens, being just unbelievably wealthy, right? Sitting on all that oil, able to essentially crash and burn the oil industries in every single other country on the planet. They're like, oh, we got money to burn. We can afford to give oil away to essentially fuck all of the competition over and make them all go bankrupt. And then we'll jack up the price once that happens. This is what they've been doing, right?
It's called competitive predator dumping, I believe.
Yeah. But if you look at 50 years ago, 50 or 60 years ago in Saudi Arabia, you could get shot from drinking, for drinking from another family's well. You essentially had a situation where, everybody was dirt poor. Oil had not been found. It was literally you had a wealthy royal family, certainly, in comparison to their subjects, but what you have now is you have, oh God, what would you call it in the British vernacular?
I would call it a sexually frustrated.
Jumped up fucking nobility. Jumped up fucking pantry boy. You have the nouveau riche. That's what the Saudi royal family is. They're the nouveau riche.
I don't know what that means.
That means they are like the scumbag, loser, white trash who lived in a trailer park and won the Powerball, and now they live in a mansion and think that, and they don't know how everything operates. They don't, they just want fucking, and this is their first taste of power, right? Because they were raised, their culture, they're like dirt poor. They were shooting each other over water, for fuck's sake, right? And now they got enough money to bankrupt the whole fucking planet.
Yes, pretty much.
And what are they going to... They've never learned how to responsibly handle power, right? They haven't had enough time. They've had, 60 years since Lawrence of Arabia?
Well, the thing that I wanted to point out pretty much, that book I read, it was only recently released, and that's from the Ukrainian author Yaroslav Tromov, and it's called The Forgotten Uprising in Islam's Holiest Shrine, The Siege of Mecca. And that was, according to him and according to his research, the starting point of this entire Salafist movement. Because the second king of Saudi Arabia, Salman something, I have no fucking clue, one of those Arab names, he was a modernizer. He brought television to Saudi Arabia, he brought electricity to Saudi Arabia, he really put a lot of effort into modernizing his country. But the overall religious zealots within the clerical establishment, they consistently tried to bring up further against that modernization of the country, because they saw it as Western and as evil. And as a result of that, the king was assassinated, and in 1979, which is often forgotten, there was a siege in Mecca, where a radical cleric took up arms, held about 1,000 Muslims hostage at the holy mosque in Mecca, and declared himself to be the announcer of the apocalypse or something, and the return of Muhammad. And yes, there's a quick question, as I see.
Well,
Yeah,
there's
a question from the chat. Why don't we just answer that now?
I'll read it.
Go on.
Okay. Question for the apologist. Is there any streak of Islam that does not believe Muhammad, the child fucker, is the example to be followed? Please answer, honey badgers.
Okay, 2 points. First of all, I would like to point out the rampant misandry in the idea of a man who has sex with an underage girl is a horrible child fucker, and there's no agency given to the girl wanting to do it. I know pedophilia, or even the other one that the name escapes me.
Hebophilia might be what you're thinking about.
And
it was pretty common back then. I mean, European monarchs pretty much, they even fuck their own sisters, pretty much.
And they had children at 14, and this is a girl who was 9. And the story of Lolita.
She had reached menarche. She was. She had
old
hit.
enough to bleed, right?
Well, she was sexually mature in that sense, physically.
Very important.
All right, everyone.
Right. So we're completely ignoring the idea that a young girl may have enough sexual curiosity or even desire to actually engage in a relationship with a man, and we're putting all the blame on the man. So that in itself needs to be examined. Now, going back to the actual question about is there any streak of Islam that does not believe Muhammad is the example to be followed? Well, first of all, Muhammad is believed to be a divine messenger and prophet, the same as Quran believes about Jesus, by the way. So they also believe that Jesus is a prophet and a very important figure. Unlike Judaism, Islam actually does believe in the divinity of Christ. So ultimately, from what I understand about Islam, that is, the idea is to follow Allah's example, is to follow the laws of Allah. And what Allah gave you, you're supposed to take that and follow that. And Muhammad is a prophet who is divine, and he gives you, things that, but he was not perfect. He was not Allah. So you're conflating the fact that he was a divine prophet with what should be followed, which is the will of Allah, and those two are quite separate.
Okay, can I just get in here and say that I absolutely and utterly disagree with Anna on the issue of 9-year-olds being able to consent sexually to adults. That being said, it was a very different time, and it's hard to judge a different time and place based on our values. So,
I'm not saying consent, I'm saying curiosity. They may not like it or regret it or not realize what they got into, but there's still an element of sexual curiosity in you.
You know what? I don't really care. I really don't care about whether Aisha had sexual desire, had sexual curiosity at age 9, right? She was, by the standard of her time, which was at menarche, right? She was a woman. She had reached the age of majority. Bar mitzvahs, when do they happen? At age 13.
Right? I just want to say...
Bat mitzvahs at 12, right? Okay, so you can't tell me. Like, the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, right? That is the historical age at which a boy becomes a man and a girl becomes a woman, and they are able to marry, have sex, and have children and be responsible for themselves, right? 13 and 12. Okay, so don't fucking give me this child rapist bullshit about a girl who menstruated at age 9, who was betrothed and married to a man at age 6, which happened all through fucking Christendom, right? Betrothed and married at age fucking 6, and the marriage was consummated when she bled.
All right.
I just wanted to say to whoever may have asked that question that during the 6th century, your ancestor was probably hunting wild boars in a forest somewhere in Central Europe with a wooden spear. What matters more is the here and now. And if you take a look at a Kenyan Sufi Muslim, he plays guitar and plays the drums and sings music to be closer with Allah. The Salafist Muslim in Saudi Arabia grows a beard and dresses in Arab clothes, white Arab clothes, to be without any kind of Schmuck, necklaces or any kind of rings or something, to be closer to Muhammad. You know, the people. Yeah. This is the main difference. There are people, the people in Saudi Arabia, the Salafists, they have some kind of perverted fetish for Muhammad, whilst most other Muslims want to be closer with Allah. So the question of Muhammad is not as relevant. For most Muslims, Muhammad was merely the messenger of God, but not God himself. And maybe because we, who came out of predominantly Christian societies and know Christianity, where the Prophet was supposedly God and a human being at the same time, God and the messenger at the same time, we might confuse that a bit when we look at it.
Well, I agree. But, you know, like this whole thing with pedophilia, you know, according to our modern standards, pedophilia was just par for the fucking course.
Yeah, well,
the fucking course 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, so essentially everybody, yes, Muhammad, okay, yes. We agree with or at least I agree with everything that you have said about Muhammad. Unfortunately, if you throw out Muhammad as a historical icon, you're going to be throwing out a hell of a lot of people, including a lot of the founders of our cultures. So, yeah, I think it's not that I disagree with your argument. I think I'm with Kraut. It's irrelevant to what's happening right now. It's a pointless diversion on.
Well, it is irrelevant to what's happening right now because you know what? Pedophilia, according to our standards right now, was rampant among Judaism, among Christendom, and among Islam, you know, 1,600 years ago, 1,400 years ago.
And Shintoists and people all over the world, basically.
And yeah, even our cultural forebears, the Romans and the Greeks, they also engaged.
My grandfather.
What are we doing right now?
When you're only 30 years old, you know, you get it when you can. Right?
What are we doing right now? What are we doing right? We are treating our 22-year-old university student children, right, who are adults. They are 4 years older than they would have to be to pledge to give their lives for their country, to vote, right? Okay? And we treat them as if they can't even manage their own fucking sex lives.
Okay.
That's an American thing.
Young marriages were par for the course. Hell, what was that rock musician, Great Balls of Fire? Jerry Lewis.
Yeah.
Yeah, he married his cousin and she was like 13. Yes, it was pretty much par for the course for a long time. It has changed in a lot of our cultures, and for good reason. Because our life expectancies have increased, and our maturity, because our societies are a hell of a lot more socially complicated. So it is, while we can say back then they were dealing with a different set of circumstances, and the circumstances they were dealing with is you needed to pop out about 6 children before you were 25, or so that maybe 2 of them would survive before you died at 35.
Well, that's actually something I wanted to bring up. I mean, you know, when a lot of times when people look at religion, they're looking at it as though the religion came and then the culture followed. And I think that that seems to be backwards. Like, you would think that depending on the conditions in which your culture or your society is growing, the religion or the faith or whatever, the theology that comes out of it basically exists in order to sort of serve the purpose of, because it's like it was a method of control, right? I mean, that's really what religion is. It's a way to explain the things that we don't understand and to inform people on how they should, on behavior and standards and how we can essentially make for a better society if we follow these rules. And I
believe.
Oh, go ahead.
I believe too many people put far too much importance into things that happened 800, 900, or 1,000 years ago. What is more relevant to our lives is what has happened in the past 100 years.
Yeah.
Going on about the Crusades, etc., etc. That is stuff that the Salafist preachers in Saudi Arabia do.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's not something that we should be doing in our modern civilized society. We should be.
Yeah, we should be moving past old grudges.
No. I agree.
Okay, Karen, don't move around so much.
No, but I agree. I agree that we should be getting past old grudges. But I do think that it is relevant to look at how things were done 1,000 years ago, what things happened 1,000 years ago.
I didn't say that. That. I would agree on that.
It really does tell us something about ourselves, because our biology, our evolutionary psychology, our human behavior, our fixed action patterns haven't substantially changed from then. So we still have the same tendency toward tribalism. You saw it in all of those feminist articles where they all went along the entire, like the party line. We're going to preach the party line, and we're going to use all the same buzzwords to do it, and we're going to essentially write 40 versions of the exact same article, right? Because it's a tribalistic. We have a tendency toward tribalism, and that can parse itself on skin color. It can parse itself on political ideologies or religious ideologies. It can parse itself on class, on any number of factors. Sexism is age old, right? It's different from tribalism, but it's probably older than tribalism is. And
okay, Karen, when you're done, I gotta go after this
thing. But it's still something that we can look at how things were done back then, and by examining how things were done back then, we can understand why we do the things we do now. So why do we incorporate sexual violence against women into our narratives that we use to demonize the members of a tribal outgroup?
Okay. She's come back with, I assume it's the same guy, right, Brian?
Yeah, So We Meet Again says, the problem is that so long as they keep an abomination as an example to be followed, there cannot be any reformation. You are missing the point. All right.
Okay, all right. I gotta get this.
Okay, but I want to say something to it too. But go ahead.
All right. Let me explain. Let me reveal my incredible dark side that I have kept in chains. I fucking hate Muslims. Like, there is no one in this room and no one in that chat who hates Islam more than me. This is dark Alison talking. I lived for fucking 10 years in Saudi Arabia. There is no hatred greater than mine. But I put it under wraps and talk about this stuff rationally. Now, you say that Muhammad raped a 9-year-old girl how many fucking centuries ago? Well, guess what? Right now, right here in our culture, something like 12,000 boys get raped every fucking year in a juvenile detention facility, and we don't care because their rapists are, guess what? Women! We turn a blind eye. We know about it. Everybody who is in power to do something about it knows about it. They do nothing. I don't give a shit about some fucker centuries ago and what he did. Yeah, it was bad, but he's dead. Everyone involved is dead. Let us talk about what is happening now and talk about solutions and stop pointing fingers at shit that happened millennia ago and ignoring what is happening now in our own fucking cultures.
Okay, I want to also say, if you're going to get on Muhammad's case for having sex with his wife after she, reached her biological womanhood by having her period, okay, which happened to be at age 9, according to the texts.
Can we please stop talking about this?
If we're going to talk about that, why don't we talk about the fact that Joseph was a fucking cuck and Mary was a cheater?
Or what about Lot's, not Lot's daughters, but the other, I think Lot, no? The other guy who, like,
Lot, his daughters raped him. His fucking daughters committed incestuous rape by plying him with so much wine that he would not know what was happening, and then had sex with him and bore his children.
Oh, what about Jacob, who completely cheated his brother out of his inheritance by lying to his dad and pretending to be his brother, and then fucked over his father-in-law multiple times through cattle manipulation, and then stealing all of his shit that his wife hid under her skirt and said she was menstruating, so don't come check on my shit. And all Jacob's father-in-law wanted was to see his kids, and he's like, no, let's leave.
There's another fucking shit. There's another fucking shit.
What about the forced circumcision of a whole country, a whole city of people who just wanted to marry the daughters of this prince? Was like, I want to marry your daughter, she's beautiful. And the dudes are like, yeah, sure. Jacob's like, all right, sure, yeah, you know what, you're all grown men, how about you go through circumcision, and that way you can marry our daughters. And they did, and these men knew that those other men will be vulnerable and unable to do anything for 3 days because they just had circumcision as adults, and they went over and slaughtered all of them.
Okay,
So,
all right. There's all kinds of insanity. But here's the thing. I actually was enjoying listening to Kraut's explanation because it made me realize that the Islam that I hated may not actually be the entirety of Islam, which is actually somewhat liberating for me. Because I don't like carrying that. I don't like carrying the anger that I have towards Islam for the rest of my fucking life. And that contextualized what I was seeing in Saudi Arabia in a way that I have never heard before.
Well, that's actually what the next thing I wanted to bring up. Okay. When people basically mine the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah to find reasons to hate that religion, I don't think it's actually constructive for a lot of reasons. But one of the main ones is that Christianity and Judaism both went through a reformation. They basically have, in many ways, they've changed. Now, of course, there are still parts or pockets of both of those faiths that, are crazy and whatever. But for the most part, that the stuff that's in those books, that's just not the way that it's reflected in most of our civilized world.
Nobody's stoning their kids for being disobedient.
No, that's not happening. So there's no point in bringing it up. However, one of the things that I've seen people discussing when it comes to Islam is that Islam needs to basically go through a reformation. But Kraut and T was talking about how there appears to be a civil war within Islam. And I have a suspicion that is Islam's reformation. We're basically experiencing it. We're probably, because, how long did the Protestant Reformation take? How long did that whole thing with Martin Luther, how long was that?
300 to 400 years, I would say.
Yeah. So, it takes generations, multiple generations to get that done. And I think that what we're seeing...
One thing I wanted to interject. If
you want to add to that, that's fine. Because at the end of the day, I don't think talking about the stuff in the book and the stuff with Muhammad and then trying to find equivalents in the Bible or in Judaism, I don't think any of that shit's helpful. That's basically useless. I want to know.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
We are on the wrong side of that civil war. We are supporting the wrong sides of that civil war. We are pumping the Saudis full with weapons, military bases, etc. The Russians are giving their military support to the clerical fascists in Iran, who are not really that much better. But nobody is really lending support to the Sufi Muslims of Kenya, or the New Democracy in Tunisia. And because we are not trying to support those who genuinely want to reform the Islamic world, the reform agenda is consistently failing. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I believe we are contributing to the fact that reform is not happening faster.
Okay.
It would seem that sometimes it's difficult.
Brian?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We're moving on to 3 hours. I think we need to end this.
Okay.
Thanks for talking to you. I have to be on work in 2 hours anyway.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, good night.
Okay, thanks for coming on, and
Yes.
feel free to come on again. I hope my Darth Vader rant didn't scare the shit out of everyone.
No, I believe I left my Skype details in the chat. Did I?
Okay.
Yeah,
I believe
I
you
also
did.
have his Skype, so I can pass it on.
Okay.
You don't have
Just
to leave.
remember-
We can end it, and then we can.
No, I want my breakfast.
Okay. Gotcha.
Just remember the time difference.
Okay, gotcha. Oh
Thank
yeah.
you, Sprout and Tea, and I like the name. Now I get it. Half German, half English.
Half English. Yes, exactly. Okay.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, actually, where I am. Okay. Bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
All right. Okay, Brian. I think.
You want me to just close it out?
Oh my God, yeah.
That was
All right.
just one fucking exhausting show.
All right. This was well,
God, stop clacking!
What did I do? Oh, that's your dog.
No, the dog is clacking.
Stop
No.
clacking, Bri.
No, my nails are nice and short. If you could see, I keep them trim. I actually have a nail biting problem. So, okay. So if this is a very difficult topic. Please, though, share your views, opinions, thoughts in the chat. Talking about Islam in the abstract is just way too big for a 3-hour show. We mainly wanted to focus on the events of Cologne and I think around the threat narratives that feminists like Lori Penny and who else was talking about? Clementine Ford had basically presented, along with the way the Young Turks talked about it, and anybody else who basically had more of an interest in. I'm sorry?
Even conservatives, the way they talk about it.
And the conservatives too. And what we're more interested in is basically like finding out what really happened, trying to stay civil and rational throughout this time, which is obviously very difficult for the victims or potential victims of what happened. So just leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. If you have any insights that you'd like to offer or opinions, please share them with us, and also share them with other people. Subscribe, like the video, and yeah, that's it. And if you want to send us a personal email, that's topic@badgerpod.com. And please help us create more content. Help us to grow the channel. We want to bring on more guests. We want to basically make this into the biggest thing that we can. And we need new media, and we want to be at the forefront of that. So patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. Thanks, guys.
Okay, and